Kathy Codianne had a personal matter that she needed to attend to this evening. So my name's Elaine Sanfilippo for the people that don't know me, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. So if those who wish could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. So our first order of business tonight is citizen comments. I'm going to read these in the order in which the topic appears on the agenda, not necessarily when they came into us. And I would like to let everyone know that we do have an item on the agenda tonight regarding the policy for citizens' comments. So if you are interested, please stick around for that. So the first one comes from John Bailowitz of Bolton regarding the high school potential hybrid model. Says, I watched the video and feel the survey provided as a single input with 3 options does not adequately allow the parents to express their input. This needs to be a much more comprehensive survey for it to have any meaning whatsoever. Why I say this is the following. 1, I believe the students should be back at school and have from the start. I've sent my questions and concerns to you, the superintendent, and the school committee prior to the school year. However, only the school committee responded. 2, the remote model is working okay in the high school from a teaching perspective, as they appear to get close to full curriculum. However, parents are still having to augment this with extra time spent on many subjects, as well as some extra tutoring, as Zoom classrooms seem to be less conducive, in my opinion, for interactive questions. 3, although I support kids going back to school, the hybrid model presented is less than appealing to me, given they will reduce the lessons by seemingly 40%. That is the main issue I have with hybrid at the elementary level in this district. The instruction and workload is far too little, and the kids are falling behind. In essence, my opinion is the kids should be back full-time, but if not, a better hybrid model should be explored. I don't see why a teacher can't teach cohort A in person and cohort B via Zoom at the same time. Most business meetings have a mixture of in-person and remote attendees, and I see no reason the school cannot adopt a similar approach so as not to sacrifice the amount of instruction our kids get. Was this explored? Please reach out if you would like to discuss. All right, our second citizen's comment is from Tracy Lindsay of Bolton. And this is also regarding the high school proposed hybrid model. I am writing once again to ask a few questions in light of the results of the NRHS survey asking students and parents which model they recommend implementing at the high school. 52.5% chose remote and 47.8% chose in-person, either hybrid, 33%, or full in-person, 15%. Considering the recent spike in cases in the latter half of November, it is not surprising there was a split compared to the summer survey when 70% wanted in-person school and positive cases were an order of magnitude lower. The question still remains to be answered, and our family has asked it multiple times. Where is the promised plan by December 1st for return to in-person learning with metrics and/or guidelines to inform and determine the conditions and timing of implementation of that plan? Also, will the survey question be asked again in December and in January? It would be great to hear how parents and students feel on a monthly basis about the learning model at our only remote school in the district. I am sure it was an easy survey to distribute and summarize. Perhaps the high school and task force can evaluate the feedback on the hybrid plan to tweak it to meet the concerns that have been expressed and which may have caused some to want to remain remote. It's hard to know if the choice of remote is due to the spike in cases, the hybrid plan that was presented, or other reasons without a more detailed survey. 48% is not a small minority, and neither is 52%. All these voices matter. There is a need for change based on the 48% or 569 parents and students asking for some in-person learning. Although now may not be the right time, it would behoove the school committee and high school to start drawing up scenarios for those changes to happen in Q1 of 2021. After Q2/semester 1 ends around the start of February, would be a convenient time for a return to in-person in some manner. I hope my student makes it until then emotionally. She plays volleyball on a club team with girls from around the region, and she asked me if any other schools are remote because everyone on her team, 22 other girls besides her and another Nashoba student, is in a hybrid school. She doesn't understand why Nashoba can't offer that as well. I also strongly believe that those who want to remain remote need to have that option. The pitting of remote and in-person advocates against one another by some, the most disappointing being the teacher letter, seems to be at odds with the majority of parents who simply wish for their students to have a choice in learning. Please communicate with the high school community your plans, metrics, and timing options for return to school and ability to provide remote schooling simultaneously as soon as possible. December 1st has come and gone. We could really use some hope for a return to school in 2021. And our third citizens' comments is regarding the Tri-Town meeting agenda item that we have coming up. And this is from the Board of Selectmen in Bolton. Dear members of the school committee of the Nashoba Regional School District, at a meeting held on November 24th, 2020, in compliance with the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law, the Bolton Board of Selectmen voted to send this response to your letter of November 12th, 2020. We disagree that there was general agreement at the October Tri-Town meeting that future meetings would have to be conducted differently. Therefore, we see no reason to establish an ad hoc committee to evaluate alternatives. The Tri-Town meeting is itself an ad hoc meeting. There is nothing in the regional agreement establishing the Tri-Town meeting. To create an ad hoc committee to advise an ad hoc committee is like a dog chasing its tail. A lot of activity, but no forward progress. The proper venue for changing the Tri-Town meeting is through the agenda at the Tri-Town meeting. Any school committee member and any school district administrator may request items be put on the agenda. It is unfortunate that the school committee withdrew from the Tri-Town meeting without trying this practical approach. Any venture that spans 17 years and includes 3 municipalities and a school district can be improved. As you seem earnest in your desire for change, we will assume your participation in the Tri-Town meeting of December 9th, 2020 at 7 p.m. We request that this letter be read aloud during citizens' comment section of the next school committee meeting. Sincerely, the Bolton Board of Selectmen. Okay, so our next order of business is the consent agenda. Leah, if you could read that motion for us.
Hi. I move to approve the consent agenda of December 2nd, 2020, containing the meeting minutes of November 18th, 2020, and the warrants of December 4th, 2020.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, I got my sheet here with everybody's names on it now. Cohen.
Yes.
Collins.
Yes.
Eckel.
Yes.
Gleason.
Yes.
Horesh.
Yes.
Dr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Pock.
Yes.
Rubenstein.
Yes.
Sanfilippo, yes. And Viverito.
Yes.
All right. All right, next up is the chair updates. I have 4 of them for you. The first one is the legal training workshop with Mike McCarthy. Be held before our next school committee meeting, December 16th from 4:50 to 5:50, and it'll be using the same Zoom link as the regular meeting. Second is, I probably should have said this first. So Kathy's not with us tonight. She's also going to be stepping back from some of her chair duties for the next couple of weeks while she attends to some personal matters. So I'll be stepping in with that. If everyone could just try to remember to CC me on stuff so I know what's going on, or otherwise forward it when you remember. The third thing that I want to update on is, so as you remember, we voted to create a diversity, equity, acceptance, and racial justice committee at our last meeting. And so outreach is beginning on that. So I put a notice in the Stow Independent and Bolton Independent that just says, the Nashoba Regional School Committee recently formed a diversity, equity, acceptance, and racial justice committee and is looking for volunteers. All are welcome. Black, Indigenous, and people of color and other minority voices especially encouraged. Initial work will focus on setting norms and goals and increasing awareness in the school and broader community. The committee will meet virtually, though attendance is not required for participation. Please contact Elaine Sanfilippo. My email is sanfilippo@nrsd.net to receive updates. So we will have a group email address at one point, but for now, for anybody watching, if you would like to receive updates or be involved in any way, send me an email and I'll be collecting all that information as we move forward. All right, that paper goes down now. And the fourth thing that I want to say, or my update, is really more of a framing, both for the meeting tonight and I think just in general moving forward. I've been hearing a lot recently from people across the board. This is teachers and students and parents and administrators, and even within the school committee itself, that people don't feel supported. And that's really sad, because I don't think that that is anyone's intention. I got an email today, and one of the sentences in the email really stood out to me, so I want to read it for everyone tonight. It says, "We live in a moment where nothing is ideal, and we have all grown familiar with loss. Lost income, lost opportunities, lost freedoms, lost loved ones." And I think that as we go through the day-to-day business of the work that we have to do, whether that's raising kids or teaching students or making difficult decisions for a school community, sometimes I think we forget that these are not normal times. This is not business as usual. And so I think it's really important for us to every once in a while just stop and say that out loud and recognize it, and recognize that, you know, everyone is dealing with their own invisible burdens that we can never see. So recognizing each other and recognizing our humanity here, and recognizing that we are all in this crisis together is one way that we can help support each other and move forward through the crisis together. So those are my updates. And on that note, I'm actually going to turn it over to Superintendent Clinchy, who's going to give her report.
Sure, thank you. And actually, Dr. McGuire is going to start through this, and I'm actually going to, when I get to number 3, we'll be having Anne-Marie Stoika help us out, and number 4 is the mascot. So Tanya, I'll be looking for some support there from you, and then Todd and I will talk about the COVID memos at the end. So Todd, do you want to start with the teaching and learning part, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Just a quick teaching and learning update. The Nashoba Teaching and Learning Department will be leading the district professional development next week, as we do have an early release day. That early release day consists of a cross-district day. The department has created several workshops as well as some self-directed options for all of our staff, given that we are in a remote and hybrid setting right now, for them to participate during the afternoon. A lot of the topics are focusing on social emotional learning, remote and hybrid learning, strategies in the classroom. We've got some train the trainer options for some of the work that we're doing, and some self-directed projects that we'll be filling the afternoon. The objective of this professional development continues to focus on our social emotional planning as part of our district improvement plan, as well as provide a lot of resources and strategies for remote and hybrid learning for teachers to support this year's teaching and learning models. And what I've done is provided you a link to the professional development brochure and the offerings there in the superintendent's report in the first paragraph there. So feel free to take a look at that and some of the offerings that we have. And then ultimately, I sent to all of you folks earlier in the week, or late last week, it may have been, the latest edition of our teaching and learning newsletter, the download. This week's edition also focuses on a health and wellness update. So we've included some health and wellness updates, working with Lisa Gilbicki, our nurse lead, to provide some strategies around health and wellness and staying safe and staying healthy, especially as we enter the winter months. So please check it out.
Great, thank you. The NRHS principal search, I'm just going to speak to this for a minute, and then I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to kind of take over. So the work continues, of course, to progress in this area. NSDEC is continuing to keep us apprised. Anne-Marie is working very closely with them. There are several focus group sessions that are going to be happening next week that we've mentioned before, and Anne-Marie will probably allude to that again, and we'll be sending something out via school messenger later this week, just as a reminder to that. The posting has been placed in several locations. You can also find it on our own district website. The review of applications is scheduled to start around that January 4th timeframe, and that doesn't mean that that's the closing date. It's just that that's when the review of the applications actually begins. So Anne-Marie, do you want to just kind of take it from there and maybe just give a broad stroke overview?
Sure, thank you, Brooke. Good evening, everyone. Hi. NSDEC is currently accepting application materials, and they're going to continue to do so, as Brooke said, through January 4th. NSDEC sent both via hard copy and also by email to their list and to their list serve an invitation to apply. I think Alita might have sent the school committee members a copy of that invitation to apply, so you've seen what it looks like. We also posted it on our district website with instruction for people to apply through NSDEC and not through the district, and providing instruction to them on how to do that. We're going to have 4 categories of focus groups, although there will be six sessions. There's for faculty, staff, parents, and students. They're going to take place via Zoom technology on December 8th and 10th next week. And invitations for people to participate are going to go out tomorrow. There'll be 2 sessions each because of the numbers for the faculty and for the parents. The invitation includes a link to the Zoom session except for the parent groups. For the 2 parent sessions, there's a link to pre-register, and then NSDEC will send the link to the parents by email. The parent group is capped at numbers, so if we find that we have more parents looking to participate than we have slots, they will set up some more sessions to do it. The focus groups, although they'll be run by the NSDEC people, I'm going to be a silent observer in the one for the students because our NSDEC partner isn't Corey Clear or fingerprinted, so they need someone there like me to be present. The aim of the focus groups is going to be discern the opinions of the participants on what skills, knowledge, and experiences they believe the new principal should have, and also to identify the tasks that they believe the new principal should consider focusing on in his or her first year. For those who prefer to share their insights via survey rather than by participation in the focus group, there's going to be an online survey that will be open for during pretty much the same period as the focus groups will be happening. And that's they're going to responding to those same 2 questions: what knowledge, skills, and experiences, and what should the focus be in the first year. From the results of the focus group and the online survey, NSDEC is going to compile all that, and they're going to develop for the superintendent's consideration a candidate profile and a community needs assessment. They're going to summarize the opinions of all the people who participated in the focus groups and the people who participated on the survey. Fast forward now to January. In January, Superintendent Clenchey will convene a screening committee. That committee will meet to review the procedures, develop some questions, and set up an interview schedule. They will be permitted confidential online access to the applications. They're going to interview, they'll interview the applicants that they think best meet the qualifications and the criteria that were developed. And then near the end of January, they'll determine which candidates should be sent ahead in their opinion to the superintendent as finalists. That selection of the finalists will take place in late January, early February. The superintendent will then verify their credentials, conduct her own interviews, reference checks, and make visits to their current employment locations. There'll be an opportunity for the community to meet each of the finalists. And then later in February, the superintendent will make her selection for a start date on July 1st. And we'll have a new principal.
Thanks, Anne Marie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep pushing forward, and then if we have questions at the end of all of it, we can. The mascot update, we continue to put efforts into the choosing of a new mascot and starting to map out a process for the change. The team at the high school, particularly Steve Cohen and Tanya Rich, have been working diligently with the organization that's helping us do this work. So Tanya, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to kind of give us a quick update from your perspective.
Thank you. So Steve Cohen and I have been meeting and working with our team at Herd Strategy. There's 3 members of the group that we've been meeting with. The Herd group has come up with a scope and sequence of the process, which will take approximately 4 months, as Superintendent Clenchey mentioned in her report. So the first step in the process to replace our mascot is a survey asking for input from the entire Nashoba community. This is going, current students, parents, staff, alumni, community members, etc. We launched the survey yesterday. It is an open-ended survey asking for nominations, suggestions, creative thoughts, any ideas for a new mascot moving forward. The survey was sent out via email to all families in our district, K-12, and staff. The link has been put on the high school website, and we've shared the information through social media as well. So this is going to stay open for a 2-week period. And then our team at HERD is going to review the results and highlight any trends in that data to bring back to our team at the high school to move into the next step of the process. So again, it's an exciting time. We're just getting started, and we're excited to work with HERD right now.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
The COVID memos, we've had a lot of discussion on this, and Dr. McGuire, I'm going to ask you to weigh in here in a minute. And I think that to date, we've been sending out basically regular template memos saying this many individuals are out in a building at a time, and maybe X number of people are out for quarantining purposes or whatever. We never identify whether it's adult or students, but we just always give a round number. And I think that we are looking at this as we do everything and say, can we do this a little bit better? And we're just feeling that perhaps we're sending out maybe too many memos, that maybe what we should probably be doing now as we start to move forward is send one out, generate one a week. So Dr. McGuire, do you want to just speak to that?
Sure. We sent out one that went out this evening at 5:30, kind of outlining what that newer process might look like. And we feel pretty good doing that because we now have the dashboard that is up on the district main website, which is in real time, and we update those numbers, and those numbers in the towns are updated regularly, as well as they're updated regularly for the school district. So that's another resource. We were certainly sending out, memos either every day or every other day as we were getting, a positive case or a couple of positive cases. And we're certainly trying to streamline everything for people so that we can send out, memos on a regular expected basis. That being said, anybody who's obviously involved, who might be a close contact or in terms of the contact tracing, those people are informed immediately. But so it's just a matter of trying to streamline the process and be sending out, a timely weekly email to allow people to know that these are the number of positive cases, these are the locations, as well as the contact tracing and the number of close contacts. And plus, as of today, we haven't had to make any changes to the learning models. So you can bet that if we had to make a change to a learning model immediately, that would be something that obviously we would jump right on and not certainly wait a week to do anything like that. So it's just the ones that are certainly not impacting any of our learning models, and that we can send out in a weekly and a timely expected memo to the community. Because I think we're on now COVID alert memo 11 or so. So, and the work that's going into that with all of our principals and our nurse in the central office in terms of the contact tracing has been a lot.
Phenomenal. So that's it for our superintendent's reports. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions.
All right, Mike.
Yep, just real quick. First, I think it's important to acknowledge the acting chair's updates and comments on empathy. I think that those were very well received and very timely, and I very much appreciate that. So thank you for that. And just as a follow-up to Todd, your comments, I'm wondering, do you know if there's any sense of how much of the reported numbers at our schools represent the total cases, right? So only, we only collect data from people who report the data. Are we working, or does the Board of Health have data that kind of corroborates our data and says, yeah, it's fairly consistent with the total number of cases in our area? Or is it just, we don't really know how many other cases there are because they're simply not reported?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't pretend to be an expert on it, and Lisa's not with us tonight, but I can tell you that Lisa is in contact with the Board of Health multiple times a day, which is why we are combining, the dashboard. In the dashboard, we're combining our data within the town data so that people can take a look at the town data, which certainly is updated by the Board of Health, and then our own data. You're exactly right that you're right. Sometimes things will go unreported to us. In terms of the school district, but that's where we hope that the catch-all is with towns.
Right.
But you are absolutely right. There will be some cases that either are not reported, But in terms of the number of contacts that we are having with the Board of Health on a daily basis is pretty specific and pretty routine.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
And for anybody who maybe wasn't watching our meeting last time, that COVID dashboard is on the homepage of the district website, correct?
Yes.
Yep. And it's, Elaine, it's been updated up through today. I worked with Lisa on that today. So it's located under important updates on the main district webpage, and that runs through December 1. So all the data there should be updated as of late last night, and we updated it this morning.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Leah, you had a question.
Yeah, so the first thing that I wanted to say was that, Todd, I think that your professional development construction is so incredibly professional. Well done on that. I'm sure that the teachers are really excited to engage in that, so it's awesome.
Thanks.
The other thing that I wanted to just clarify for myself, maybe, and others, Anne-Marie, did you say that the focus group participation email is going to go out tomorrow to all the district families?
It's going to go out to the students, the faculty and staff, and to parents district-wide, regardless of level.
Okay, got it. And so the email that you send out will give instructions on how they can request to participate.
The only ones that need to register, pre-register, so to speak, are the parents, and that's because of the they're keeping the groups smaller there. Anyone else, it just gives the Zoom link. So for students, it says here's the Zoom link and the time. For the faculty, there are two. You can either Zoom link on here at this time or here at this time. And who did I miss? The staff. It gives the Zoom link directly. The parents, it's a SurveyMonkey link, and then they need to put in their email address, and then they'll send them the Zoom. NSDEC will send them the Zoom link.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Amy.
Yeah, I wanted to also thank Elaine for setting the tone of, providing support to each other, keeping in mind that we all might be facing silent battles, and also thank Anne-Marie for sharing so many details about the process for searching for a new principal for the high school. It's good to know that we're going to be reaching out to so many groups, so many stakeholders who are interested in finding an excellent candidate that's going to be at the high school starting in July. Very excited to see how this process rolls out. So thank you so much for that update.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to our new section called Unfinished Business, because we learned from Glenn Kuchar, the executive director of MASC, that there is no old business, there's only unfinished business. So the first item tonight is the athletics update, and Tanya's going to present for us. The context here for the committee is that the vote that we took at the beginning of the school year to approve sports was not simply for fall sports, it was for all sports. So no action tonight would be required if we wanted to move forward with winter season sports. And again, in the, whatever that interim season's called, I can't remember. And then again in the spring. If we wanted to make changes, then we would have to make a motion and go through that process. And it would be an amendment process. So I will turn it over to Tanya.
Thank you. So I just want to thank you guys for having me tonight to give an update on sports. Like you just said, I know we met back in September. We all expected to be in a different place right now. But tonight I'd like to give you an update on fall and how it went, and then just give you the review of the proposed plan for winter, and we can go from there. Next slide. Thank you. So overall, we had a very successful fall season, and I think it's because everybody worked together. It was a true team effort between our student athletes and coaches, doing a great job with following new protocols, and most importantly, being very honest with our daily COVID screening. As I mentioned on this slide, we used an app called Sway, and the kids had to answer the questions every day, and everybody was very honest. So if someone had a symptom, between myself, our trainer, and our nurse at the high school, we all worked together to talk to that student and family, And again, we had 14 students tested and we had 14 negative tests. We had some kids that had a quarantine here and there, but again, I think the collaboration and how we worked together really helped out a lot. The only issue that we ran in during the fall was we had a few parents attend away events, which was disappointing to me, as you know, I understand parents and families really want to see their child play, but I would have hoped that the guidelines that we set forth to follow by everyone would have been followed. Again, this was a very small handful of parents, but it was something that came up and was brought to my attention from opposing ADs. And I just thought that, you know, I'd mention it here, that that was like the one thing that kind of took me away from focusing on our kids here, dealing with that. But again, small handful was not a large issue. Next slide. So again, just update the graphic a little bit here is, you know, our roadmap to athletics and what the state has to do every season to get ready for a sports season. So the EEA released their updated guidelines on November 6th. And over the last few weeks, numerous MIA committees met to create the modifications and protocols for each sport. These MIA committees, I just want to note that are made up of athletic directors, principals, superintendents, school committee reps, officials, coaches, and medical personnel. So after the EA, we had the sport committees, the sports medicine committee, the COVID task force, and the board of directors all had to look through all these protocols and guidelines for each winter sport before it got to the league and district level. Our league has created a very lengthy document with protocols and guidelines for all of our schools to follow. And again, our goal is to create the safest environment possible for our student athletes and give them the opportunity to participate. So this is where we are, and we're here tonight to discuss it at, you know, the district level. Next slide. So just quickly, this slide shows the proposed winter season timeline. Season is scheduled to begin on December 14th. Our preseason would run from the 14th to the 23rd. The grace period, which is pretty much our break, runs from the 24th to the 3rd. And during this time, we would want to suggest limited practices and suggest remote contact during this time. Regular practices would resume after vacation. And the thing I do want to note is all this preseason would just be in our own team cohorts, and we would not have any competitions until January. January 6th would be the earliest date you could have a hockey game, and the 8th would be the earliest for basketball and the rest of our winter sports. Next slide. So the sports that have been approved at the state level for winter are basketball, hockey, skiing, gymnastics, and swimming. Indoor track has been moved to the fall 2 season, and this was mainly because of facilities. Not many places have indoor tracks, and right now with everything going on, there wasn't enough facilities to have indoor track. Indoor track teams are going to be given the option to have a limited number of practices. And then wrestling has been moved to the spring season as the EEA has not approved any wrestling at this point. I also want to note that the Midwatch League has discussed middle school athletics again, and the recommendation was to not offer middle school basketball and athletics for the winter season. Again, the league will reevaluate this prior to the spring season for sports. And the last thing that I think is very important for winter sports is that District 2 and 3, which combines all of Central Mass, the district athletic committees voted unanimously not to allow any spectators at winter contests this year, to limit exposure. If you allow parents into, you know, a pool or a gym or, you know, a rink, you're adding exposure to our athletes. So we figured the best way to have winter sports is to limit that exposure and would be with no spectators. I will note, though, that we are working on a league protocol for coming up with plans for Senior Day recognition, because that is very important to senior parents, and we understand the importance of that. So that's something that we are working on. Next slide. So after reviewing the fall model and after numerous discussions at the league and district level, Central Mass has decided to continue to divide schools into pods again. And these pods were designed based on league, geography, and competitive balance. teams will only play teams within their pod and will not cross over into other pods for their sport. And our schools will not participate in any non-league contests or scrimmages during the winter season. And right now, the plan is to have teams play a shortened season with a max of 14 total competitions. And this just lists the different sports we have. And because every sport has different schools that offer it, the pods are a little different. But these are the pods for winter season. Next slide. So the Midwatch League ADs have been working for a few weeks on updating and revising protocols and guidelines for winter sports. And these guidelines were finalized by ADs yesterday during our meeting, and our league principals are currently reviewing this document and will have final approval by the end of this week. So in addition to following all EEA and MIA guidelines, our league has set a set of protocols for tryouts, practices, competitions, game day management, facility management, rosters, sub-varsity teams, transportation, etc. And some of these examples could be wearing masks at all time, limiting the number of days per week you can play, the length of practices, protocols on hand sanitizing, having no access to locker rooms, roster limits, even as something as specific as we're looking at for a basketball game, having teams on opposite sides of the court completely. So you have a home team on one side, the away team on the other side where spectators would be, so you can space out those chairs and make sure they're 6 feet apart and there's enough social distance between every player. So again, this is a large document. I did share with our school committee today. Again, it's only draft form and it's not finalized till our principals approve it, but I thought that it was important for everybody to see that and that, information and the work that we've been doing behind the scenes right now. Next slide. So again, I think we all know that athletics can play a vital role in keeping our kids engaged and give them some sense of normalcy right now, dealing with this difficult time for all of us. I think we also know the importance of athletics for students' physical and mental health. I do understand there's many concerns out there with everything going on. But I do think that we do have a good plan in place that could provide a safe opportunity for our winter athletes like we did for the fall. We'll continue to follow all recommendations and guidelines from the EEA, the MIA, our district in general. And at this point, I just want to thank you guys again for allowing me to come and speak to you tonight. And I can answer any questions or follow up with any discussion. So thank you all.
All right, thank you, Tanya, so much. So
You're welcome.
we'll begin discussion now. So would anyone like to start? Steve.
Okay, we approved basically this plan. I don't think, as she said, it's okay for us to move forward without any kind of decision making tonight. My only concern, and it's something because I've been reading about it recently, is ice hockey. Many ice hockey leagues, both the non-school and school leagues, have basically shut down because I guess is it the contact of the sport? To me, wearing all that stuff, the contact is kind of protected a little bit. But can you explain a little bit why there's been this extra concern on ice hockey? I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Tanya.
Yep. So again, I will honestly tell you that I'm not the expert on youth ice hockey, but the major issues that have come up this fall is around the club and the youth ice hockey. And the reason for the first shutdown was mainly because rinks and teams were not following the state protocols. Not everybody was being required to wear a mask. And I know the big issue was around contact tracing. A lot of teams were not supplying their roster. So if somebody came down with COVID and they went to contact trace, people weren't sharing their rosters, so they couldn't do that. So that's where the DPH stepped in and they closed the ranks. And that was the major issue with youth. Again, when I think of high school hockey, that's not going to happen. We're all going to have our rosters. We're going to have our opposing schools' rosters. We're playing in pods for ice hockey based on rinks. The MIA came out with their guidelines. Not a lot has changed with the actual play of hockey, other than they only allow one-on-one scrums. The minute more than two players are going after a puck, that whistle is going to blow. benches are going to be spread out. There, no sharing water bottles, those kind of things. But the major issue with youth hockey was just not following the protocols that were set by the EEA at that time.
All right, thank you. To Mike.
All right, sorry about that. Tanya, thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to follow up. Steve, that's a really, really good question, and that was my first concern. I also don't have kids that play hockey, mostly because my kids are a product of my own gene pool and I could never play hockey. But I do have friends whose kids play hockey, and they did kind of fill me in. There was an address by Governor Baker on October 27th and a subsequent article in the Boston Globe that said that the reason for the shutdown was because the transmission of the virus was coming from all of the activity that surrounded hockey, and basically some irresponsible behavior, not by the players necessarily, but as Tanya said in her presentation, it really came from the parents. So Baker said, if you want to know about the shutdown for hockey, blame the parents. So I think when guidelines are in place and we limit the number of bad actors and everyone kind of plays by the rules, as the MIAA board of directors approved, the issues and the risk is still quite limited. So again, the overriding reason for these transmissions in the mid-fall were these extended socializations and gatherings and tournaments surrounding hockey, but not the ice time itself. So hopefully that clarifies things.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Brooke, did you want to add to that?
I just want to say, Tanya, I think you just did an amazing job this fall with it. And the fact that we didn't have transmission, we didn't have anything like that at all. We really had no issues at all with the athletics this fall. And I just give you and the coaches and the kids so much credit, because there were new rules to play by. There were everything from how you travel on a bus to how it was all different. And I just think so much credit is deserved, so well deserved by you and everybody that worked around you to make it such a successful season. So hats off to you for all the work that you always do.
Thank you.
Mary, you wanted to ask a question.
Nope, we can't hear you, Mary.
No, you're still there. You go.
Yeah.
As I was, yeah. So I am someone so in favor of sports for students. When I was a principal of a high school, it was a small high school, I attended every game that I could possibly attend of all sports. And so when I say what I want to say, and I do thank Tanya, the amount of detail, the way that you're able to present it, but more importantly, to have everyone follow it with such good results for the fall is really remarkable. But you also mentioned the safest environment possible. And the sports that our students played in the fall were outside. And they were in this, that was the safest environment possible. And that still is the safest environment possible. So skiing, all types of skiing, if we had ice skating, those would be the sports that I would say should go on. What bothers me tremendously is that numbers are rising in the schools and in communities. And I'm worried, seriously worried about spread indoors. You also talked about parents, and I'm very familiar with sports parents. In fact, I was one. And the dedication that parents provide for their athlete children would mean going to things. I think it would be very difficult for parents not to be spectators. So I have serious misgivings about just going ahead and saying yes for all sports in the winter. And I love basketball, and I've grown to really understand hockey more, although I never played that. So I have serious misgivings, and I feel that with hockey, there are ways that students can still play. They can find ways to play, and as well as with basketball. And so that's the way I feel right now. It makes me sad to say this, but I am really worried.
So if I could just follow up on, and I 100% understand where you're coming from. I mean, like I said, I would be remiss if I say if I wasn't concerned. Like there are definitely concerns out there. Some of the things that I think when you mentioned, hockey and basketball, so roster sizes are going to be limited. A basketball roster is going to be 12 players, and that means say the gym for a practice for a varsity basketball team is going to be the 12 players and a coach. Also in our gyms, like we are going to have the door open to the outside as well. So there's going to be fresh air. It's going to be very cold if we have basketball. It's going to be cold in the gym, but that's one more step we're going to take to make sure that the airflow is moving and it's going to be safe. Also, practice won't be back to back. We're going to have at least 15 minutes in between practice times to make sure that we can disinfect any of the equipment and the areas that we're using. So basketballs, scorer's table, the scoreboard, anything that's going to be used, chairs, bleachers, everything will be disinfected in between each team coming in and out for practices. And the other thing, I know you mentioned how kids still have opportunities to play basketball and hockey with AAU and club teams, and they absolutely do. And it may just be because me and my position as the AD for this district, I feel strongly that when the kids are playing for us and under our supervision, myself, our trainer, our coaches, we know the protocols that are being followed because we've got, numerous documents from the MIA and our league. We know that is what's going to happen because it has to happen for us to be successful and for us to make sure that we're covering everything we have to do. When we're talking about AAU and club hockey and everything else, we don't know if everyone is following the rules the way they're supposed to. And that's why there has been, like, Mike mentioned, Steve mentioned, those youth hockey shutdowns. We can't control what's happening in that outside level. So I do feel like it's safer, in my opinion, it's safer for our kids to be playing for us at Nashoba than it is playing outside of Nashoba. But again, fully my opinion, and I thank you for sharing your concerns.
Tanya, I have a question about the locker rooms, and forgive me if that was in the very long document. I did look through it, but I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff in there because it seems like in the fall, a kid putting on their soccer uniform and just walking over to the field feels a little different than, say, a swimmer who needs to dress and undress.
So there will be no locker rooms for any of our sports here at the high school or any of our outside facilities as well. Obviously, if you're swimming, you're going to show up with your bathing suit on underneath warm-ups. You're not going to be walking in. But hockey, you're coming half dressed and you're putting on your skates and your helmet and stuff when you get there. But basketball, you're coming dressed, ready to go, changing your sneakers. There will be no use of locker rooms at all.
Okay, thank you. Leah.
So I also commend you, Tanya. My son played, he was lucky to play in the fall season. And so I watched it firsthand. I trust nobody more than you to make it a successful season. Thank you so much for everything that you do for our kids. I think that giving our kids safe opportunities to get together is really important right now, really important. And because of the nature of it being voluntary, I support it.
Thank you, Leah.
Okay, Mike.
Sorry, every time you call on me, it catches me off guard and I have to unmute myself. I apologize.
I'm too fast.
Mary, I also want to mention something, and I apologize, Tanya, if you've already mentioned this, but I just wanted to reiterate that the MIAA organization has a COVID-19 task force that poured over these decisions, the risks, the benefits, and they recommended winter sports, which was approved by the board of directors. Remember that they all get their guidelines from the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That's a state-run organization. So, through my lens, these are sort of the experts in the field. I mean, they spent probably countless days and hours kind of going through these options. And, I think Leah makes a strong point. I mean, these are voluntary, right? So if a family doesn't feel that their child is going to be safe, then they're obviously not going to enroll them in a particular sport. And so I think those who do probably realize that this has tremendous value as an outlet for these kids. And so I would be also very strongly in favor of continuing this.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Is there anybody that hasn't spoken that wants to say anything, make a comment or a question? We'll go to Amy.
Thank you, Elaine. I'd also like to thank Tanya. You always do such a nice job of presenting information and sharing the details and the rationale behind your recommendations. So I really appreciate that. And I'm having a hard time with the decision because I echo what Leah said. It's really important to provide opportunities for students to come together in safe ways, especially when it's voluntary. I think the issue that I'm wrestling with and is a larger issue that is how we can offer safe opportunities for other students at the school to come together for voluntary activities at the school. And so that's the issue that I'm trying to resolve in making this decision. I just felt that needed to be said.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think that is an important point. Steve, you had something you would like to say. Mute.
There we go. Okay, Tanya, you do a great job. And I can remember part of our discussion way back when talked about the inability of the school authorities to say, no, you can't play hockey or whatever else it was outside of our program. Because of what's happened, have they moved any differently on that issue? Do you remember the conversation that was there? And saying, okay, if you're going to play ice hockey in a school program, then you have to tell us that you're not going to be playing it outside, because in reality, you're going from our pool of viruses into somebody else's pool of viruses, and you may be bringing them back. Has there been any further discussion on that? And by the way, I think all of you guys are doing a great job trying to make this work.
Thank you. Actually, we brought it up in a Central Mass ADs meeting earlier today, and we're all kind of still in that spot where we feel like we cannot tell parents what to do outside of our sports. We can't tell them that they spent $3,000 for their club hockey season and we can't tell them that they can't go and play. What I did do in the fall is I spoke to every single team individually, and myself and the coaches stressed repeatedly that if they were playing outside of the Nashoba teams, to please be smart and make good decisions, because if something were to come back to one of our teams, it could shut down a program at any time, and that team could be in quarantine for the 2 weeks, or it could be done for the season. We had a successful fall, so I think hopefully the kids listened as best they could, because I know a lot of kids were still playing club soccer, and there was club basketball still going on. I think right now with our state saying that there's no crossing state lines for club sports is going to help. So the AAU basketball is not going to New Hampshire anymore, and the club hockey teams aren't traveling up and down the East Coast playing. So I think that's going to help us moving forward. But I still feel like it'd be very hard to tell parents in our district that they cannot play a club or AAU sport at this time.
Do we know which kids are playing outside the system as well as inside the system?
I would say I probably know at least 95% of the kids who are playing at a club or an AAU level. And our coaches know as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there any, Sharon, you go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understood, Tanya, the last statement that you made. Are you saying that 95% of the kids that play sports for Nashoba are also playing sports with a club?
No, I meant that I think out of all of our athletes, I think I probably know at least 95% of them that do play a club sport. So I think if I look at my soccer programs, I can pick out maybe not 100% of the kids who play a club sport, but I think I know the majority of them who play club as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think
You're
she knows them personally. All right. It seems like comments and questions have slowed. Again, if somebody wanted to make an amendment to our previous motion, that would be the action. No action here is to approve sports through the winter. And actually that continues throughout the rest of the year if we wanted to amend for any future season based on conditions or whatever circumstances at that time, we would have to bring it up again. So I am not hearing anything. So without objection, I will move on to the next agenda item unless I hear a motion now. All right. So good luck
Thank you,
to
Tanya.
our athletes and our coaches and our AD. Stay
Thank
safe
you.
out there, and we wish you guys the best for the season.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
All right, next we have a few policy amendments on the agenda. The first one, BGB, is actually just about the process of how we adopt policies. I really hope you guys can't hear my kids screaming in the background right now. And actually, there's no action that I believe we need to take on this one. It's really there for context, because if you look towards the bottom of that policy, there's a sentence that say the school committee may dispense with the above sequence to meet emergency conditions. Normally, we have 3 separate school committee meetings as part of a process to amend or adopt new policies. And so the policy that we have next on the agenda, IKF graduation requirements, would not follow that routine. So if anybody has any questions about process, they can ask them now. Otherwise, I think we can go straight into a proposed amendment for graduation requirements, which I believe Brooke and Steve will be discussing.
Sure, I'm going to start, but I'm going to turn it over to Steve right away. And this really, it's larger than the COVID year, but certainly the COVID year kind of highlighted it. So Steve, I'm going to let you just do a bit of the background on this and some general explanation and what you're looking for that we need to make the change here on that particular policy.
Yep, thank you for having me. It's not really graduation requirements, because the requirement is that 90 credits. That's not something that's changing. It's more the credits per year, essentially. The expectation for students to be fully enrolled in at least 25 credits dates back to the late 90s, when graduation requirements were changed from 84 credits to 90 credits. At that time, the high school ran an 8-period schedule, enabling students to earn up to 32 credits a year. And being fully enrolled meant being booked for 6 periods, including physical education. It was not too many years later that the high school was moved to a 7-period schedule, and at that point, we never changed that credit requirement in our handbook. During the 2 subsequent school committee reviews of graduation requirements, I think it's required every 10 years that the school committee looks at graduation requirements specifically. Some adjustments have been made to the distribution of subject requirements and to the supporting language in the policy, but no change has been made to the expectation that fully enrolled means attempting at least 25 credits per year. Change to 24 credits would be doable for grades 9 and 10, but for grades 11 and 12, it functionally means 25 credits because their PE is 1 credit versus the grades 9 and 10 versus 2 for grades 9 and 10. A change to 23 credits is doable for 11th and 12th graders with 5 academics and a semester elective in their 1 credit PE. But it would still result in 9th and 10th graders looking at 24 credits, 5 academics, a semester elective, and then 2 credits for wellness. So the difference between 23 and 24 credits as a baseline enrollment impacts juniors and seniors. Either let them stay at 23 to force them, or force them to 25. Either way, 9th and 10th graders can book at 24. Obviously, scheduling is much more complex than this presentation here, but to go through all of the various scenarios and exceptions takes a lot of time and understanding and conflicting priorities. That above is simply a boiled down version, a vanilla look at a general scheduling by grade. Any change to any aspect of scheduling will have impact to stakeholders in some areas and will undoubtedly result in negative consequences and feedback. So that's the history of the credit stuff. It has nothing to do with graduation. It's not the graduation requirement, because the requirement is 90 credits at the end of the year.
So Steve, what is the exact change that we need to make tonight?
Right now, it's saying that the students have to have a minimum of 25 credits. It probably makes more sense to put that at 23 for juniors and seniors, and 24 for freshmen and sophomores. I mean, essentially we've been doing that forever, but it isn't written in that way in the handbook. So.
Okay. So with that said, then I'm not sure, Elaine, how you'd like to proceed from here. This is not a huge change, and this has been something that really the practice has been going on well before this year, but it certainly came to life this year. So I think it's just more like almost like a course correction as such, just to change language to meet what's really happening.
Sure, and I'm assuming then when we did our policy review over several years ago, we it either wasn't caught or maybe wasn't realized at that time. I think if people have questions about it, let's get questions out of the way, and then we can talk about actually amending something. So Amy, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I was just trying to pull up the policy right now, because when I read through it, I thought I saw language in there that said this would not take effect until after. Wasn't there some language in there about when it would take effect?
It says the graduating class of 2020, which they've graduated.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood it when I read it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can say it says it would take effect for the graduating class of 2020. So we're beyond that now. So the policy should be in effect. And if we are out of compliance with our own policies, then we either need to, 1, change the policy, or 2, change the what's actually happening in the district. So does anybody have thoughts on this? All right, seems like nobody feels strongly about this. Does everyone feel like they have information, understand the policy, understand what's going on? Or what's going on at the high school, I should say. Okay, Amy, you wanted to?
Sorry, doesn't the policy, as I'm reading it now, it still says every student is expected to enroll in a minimum of 25 credits per each year. Am I missing something?
That is what we would be amending.
Oh, okay. I thought that the amend, got it.
And that's the change.
Yes, I thought that the change would have been reflected in the policy that is being presented. But we're just seeing the policy as it stands.
Yes, that is true. That is the policy as published and approved right now. I know that the policy coming up for citizens' comments sort of put a proposed policy in there and highlighted the changes to it. So yes, procedurally, that is a different format.
So we can certainly do that. We can go back and just make the change on this and then submit it, and you can push it through next meeting if you'd like to do that. Or if not, if it's just it's a small change, we can just literally make the change if you want to make the change tonight. But if you want us to go through a different process, we can do that too.
Okay, Leah, you had your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. So thanks guys for bringing this forward. Ultimately, I guess what I'm wondering is, what is the academic impact? So if we reduce the requirement, then kids will, not all kids, but some kids will then have an opportunity to have more study halls. Is that right? And then is that like a staffing, like budgetary impact? Or I guess that's what I would want to understand better. Because like if the sophomores are reduced to 24 credits, that then means then they can have one of their 7 blocks as a study hall, right?
And Steve, just correct me if I'm wrong. This has already been happening for years now. This is not this year, right? So this is not a change that we're playing catch up here. So this is, Leah, my understanding is that this has been happening for years. We're just making the correction now. Steve, is that right?
That's correct. And it's a little different because this year we had to move our PE classes around a little bit. So it became obvious to somebody that something was happening there. But so the PE classes are running because we're in remote mode right now. They're running one quarter per class, and we're required to give PE to the students once a year. And the way we worked it out was that we would do it 1 quarter per class. So for freshmen and sophomores, instead of getting 2 credits as they normally would, they're only getting 1 credit so that we can spread it out so that each of the 4 classes have their PE class this year. So that's really the only change because of the pandemic.
And so you guys, basically, I guess what I'm asking is creating a scenario where kids can have one of their blocks as a study hall, in your opinion, is totally normal, fine, no problem.
That's correct, because most of the kids don't. A lot of the kids keep the full workload. I mean, it gives them the opportunity to include electives that they might not normally be able to take. Just gives them some options.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like there's actually no academic impact because it's already going on. What they're doing now is what they will continue to do. The policy will just be up to date with what's happening in real life. Okay. So does everyone feel comfortable voting on this now, or would you prefer to wait another meeting? Give me something, guys. Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
If we could just look at the policy and just say specifically what we're going to change. If it's literally the number 25 on that, I'm comfortable voting on it tonight. But if it's going to be more substantive than that, I would like to see a red line.
No, it's just the number.
Okay. So maybe just make reference about specifically where on the page it is, and then I would be comfortable voting on tonight.
Steve, do you have that?
No, I don't.
I've
Wrong
got it
Steve.
in front of me. I can.
It's the other Steve.
I didn't hear the question.
Elaine, would you like me to make a motion?
Yeah, Amy, why don't you go ahead?
I've got it pulled up. I move that we amend the language in the IKF policy for graduation requirements to read that every student is expected to enroll in a minimum of 23 credits each year.
I think it's 2 different numbers, isn't it?
Oh.
20. I think the motion is, sorry, Amy, I don't mean to correct you, but freshmen and sophomore students are expected to enroll in a minimum of 24 credits each year, and junior and senior students are expected to enroll in a minimum of 23 credits per year. Did I write that down right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
And that's just a minimum.
That's why I figured a minimum of 23 met both requirements, but
which is fine.
So it's not specific to juniors have to do, okay, so,
It's gonna be different for juniors and seniors and freshmen and sophomores. 23, they can still have more, which isn't a problem. So
That's what I was-
23 is fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, my internet got a little spotty there. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, so any question or discussion? All right, otherwise I will call the roll. I'm gonna go backwards this time. So Viverito.
Yes.
Yeah, I mixed it up for you. Sanfilippo, yes. Rubenstein,
Yes.
Hawk,
Yes.
McCarthy,
Yes.
Horesh,
Yes.
Gleason,
Yes.
Eckel,
Yes.
Collins,
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
All right. So we have an amended policy IKF. Moving on, the next policy is BEDH, public comments. And Leah has her hand raised and I was going to turn it over to you anyway.
I'm sorry, Elaine. I wanted to know, do we need to update MASC's website? Like, should I contact Dorothy about that, or would you? How do we do that?
I have the contact person to the people that the lady that controls it online. So if these are done, I'll send them to her, ask her to do them. If I get this in a Word format, ask her to make the changes, and I'll copy you on it just as the chair of the policy, just so you can see who the contact is.
Thanks, Alita.
Awesome. Thank you, Alita. Yes. So to public comments policy BEDH, would you like to take it away, Leah?
Surely. So everybody is perhaps aware, we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, or since I've been on the committee. There was a court case that originated with the Natick School Committee that has shifted the way we interpret public comment at public meetings. So this version that you have in the packet is, I highlighted all of this because it was starting to get crazy how much they had changed, and they spliced it in different ways. So some of the language that is highlighted is in the old policy. It's just in different order. So this is what MASC is now recommending we use as our model policy for public comment at school committee meetings. And the highlighted parts are different. For some reason, and I'm not totally sure why, the part that I have stricken from the record, Steve, you have to mute. Sorry. So the part that I struck at the bottom was in our old policy, but it's not in the new policy. However, this is about allowing school committee members to meet remotely. So it really doesn't fit in this policy. So I need to follow up to see where this landed otherwise, because it's still important that we have this somewhere in our policy packet. That's neither here nor there. MASC is asking that what you see in this is what becomes BEDH. And so I assume you guys have all read it, but do you have any questions? Because this is just our first read. We will bring it back to you again at the next meeting for our second reading and the approval. Is there anything that is unclear or that you want to ask a question about?
Nope, that was good, Leah. Thanks.
Wow, a quiet committee. And for context for anybody watching, I think the impetus for this was a couple of court cases actually, right? That changed some of the rules for public comment, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed. And therefore MASC had to update their model policy. So we are all now updating our policies.
It's largely, the Supreme Court case rested on the notion that you can't restrict the content of someone's speech unless it moves into the handful of situations where content can be regulated, like hate speech is not allowed, obscenity is not allowed, etc. So there are a couple of scenarios where you can regulate the content of what somebody is saying, but by and large, Like if somebody wanted to complete a public comment that was critical of the superintendent or one of us, that is allowed because we are public figures and there's a higher level of scrutiny around government restriction. And so where it really comes down is time, manner, and place. We can still regulate that. And so we can still require people to sign in at the beginning of a meeting to kind of alert us. There's still a time limit. There's still a place, like a time during the meeting that we can allow for it. But regulating the content is has been made more clear in this update.
Okay, so, and like Leah said, this is the first reading. So if nobody has any questions or comments now, we can certainly bring it up at the next reading, which should be at our next meeting.
Elaine, would you mind if at this point in time, we turn it over to Amy just to talk about the other aspect of public comment? Is that appropriate at this moment?
Is it written in the policy right now?
No. So it has nothing to do with the policy, but like the piece about bringing people into the meeting to read their own public comments.
You know what? Go ahead. Go ahead, because I actually thought that was written in the proposed policy as it was.
Because we want to stay very true to the model policies. And yeah, so Amy, do you want to explain our recommendation on that aspect?
Sure, thank you. I was going to ask Elaine if it was an appropriate time since Kathy is not here. But since
that's okay. The other time would have been during your subcommittee readout, but it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So as part of my work on the policy subcommittee, I reviewed how other school districts in our area are incorporating public comment while they're holding their meetings remotely via Zoom, and discovered that we are the only district of the ones that I was able to reach out to and discuss this with, that is requiring citizens to submit their comments in advance in writing and then have the chairperson read their comments. So it seemed, while this policy is being updated, it seemed like an appropriate time to review whether that's still appropriate and perhaps consider whether, at least as a starting point for improving how we're handling the public's ability to engage in our meetings, whether we should be allowing citizens to read their own comments at the beginning. You know, that was one of the findings of my review, and I actually prepared a statement on this. Let me just pull that up. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to take this opportunity to read it.
Okay.
I encourage the committee to consider allowing more impactful ways to receive real-time feedback within our meetings. Like I said, including starting with letting members of the public speak at the beginning of the meeting during the scheduled public comment period. In addition, because our agendas are sometimes not specific enough even for the committee to anticipate what may be deliberated during the meeting, I encourage the committee to consider additional opportunities for members of the public to offer feedback during the meeting. And this is obviously something that we should make time to discuss as a committee. And I'm not suggesting that tonight is the night. I'm just introducing this as a report out, that's something we've discussed inside the policy subcommittee. I'm not suggesting that we allow for deliberation with the public, but we offer a chance for public comment after certain impactful agenda items at the discretion of the chair. It's my feeling if we don't take steps to improve how we're incorporating public comment, then we're forcing that conversation onto other platforms, either social media, you know, we've seen it in tri-town meetings and newspaper editorials and in certain Board of Selectmen meetings. So I think an easy place to start is allowing members of the public to speak their own comments during the public comment period.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and what you said at the end there was what we as a policy subcommittee, I know this is weird, I'm chairing, but I'm also on the policy subcommittee, had discussed bringing forward as a recommended change to the policy as well. The rest of that is a much bigger discussion, and I think it might, I know we've talked about it in subcommittee, I think it might warrant a full committee sort of discussion without actual proposed language, because it is such a big topic. But so we can talk about that and sort of items to be considered for your agenda, if that's okay. All right, without objection, I am going to move to our next item. However, so our next agenda item is the proposed hybrid model at the high school. And I know that's the big one. That being said, without objection, I would like to move the listening session item up until right now, so that we can get the perspective of the listening sessions that did occur this week before we have a deliberation about the proposed hybrid model. Mike, I know you requested doing a high school presentation, then doing the listening readout, and then doing deliberation. I think the amount of time it would take to vote all of those things in order to move that around would take longer than the actual readout itself. So if you
trust your choice.
So without objection, I would like to do those listening readouts first so that they can be incorporated into the deliberation. Mike or Leah, whoever would like to start, feel free.
Age before beauty. I'll get going. Shall we start?
Actually, I'm going to be reporting for Bolton, so I take it.
Oh, darn it. I was trying to get at Mike, Mary. Go ahead.
I know that. So you can still go first if you want, but I do have the age covered.
Oh, Mary, I apologize. I think with
okay.
Mike being on the communication subcommittee, I think I sort of just assumed that this was his baby. All right. Either way, one of you ladies would like to report it.
You are alphabetically first, so you can go ahead, Mary.
All right. So on the 30th, 7 to 8 p.m., the Bolton reps, Mike, Horesh, Amy Cohen, and I met with via Zoom. There were 29 of us all together. So 29, but 31, 29, 32 counting us. 11 people spoke. And what I did is I took notes on the community questions and feedback, and I've got all these notes. So I'm going to summarize and try to give you a sense of what that was like. Mike began with opening statement and norms, starting with questions and then going on to feedback. Amy wanted to post, and she did, through Mike's help, the YouTube video and the planned slides for all to see. And then basically both Mike and Amy hosted and shared, which had to do with some of the Zoom allowing, which person to be able to do things. So there were 11 people who spoke. A few people did also comment in chat. So in regard to the questions, one was, when will results from the one question survey be shared? And that is answered. That has been shared, or will be answered tonight. And then the questions also, a couple of people asking about the timing of what people want in regard to the set of metrics for reopening. Another question was, is there any thought to visiting other high performing districts to see what they have in place? And it seems that Nashoba is in a very different place from other high performing districts. Other districts have split classes in neighboring towns. And I think by split classes, the person meant live streaming. And there was also someone in chat wanting to know about live streaming. And that was basically the segment on questions. At that point, Mike called for feedback and comments about the hybrid model. And there were a number of comments. And beginning with 2, what a different place we find ourselves in versus summertime, that the rising number of cases means things are very different right now. and easy for us to look back, and people did comment, look backing on September, October, November, and looking at lost time, that that hindsight is 2020, and we could have been in person, and that time has been lost. But also talking about what kind of a model is best, and looking at the hybrid, and looking at questions like safety. And so a number of people talked about, here we are at the worst point, or coming into perhaps the worst time when cases are rising. One parent felt panicked at the thought of bringing students back. Also, there was a comment that the remote students are getting the short end of the stick. There's no accountability, this person thought, for students in remote. Classes are in the afternoon, and students are sleeping until noon, and then staying up all night to finish their work, and then sleeping till noon again. Another question about the safety, and asking that the superintendent would let us know, saying it's hard to understand how we're able to keep elementary and middle school hybrid when we're in the middle of a pandemic. So why can't we do the high school that way? And also the comment that if there were to be a closing of a school, the trend now is that a closure would be short term. And so when the data suggests that we could go back, how would we be ready to go back? So the next sort of group of questions came in regard to the model, and in regard to, let's say, curriculum, and the fact that right now, students with AP courses have a lot more in this synchronous time, and with the new model, they would be losing time, and that was a concern from a number of parents. Other parents who have students in AP courses felt that time could be made up, and but there were questions about if curricula is lessened in some way, how would parents know, and how could they go about helping their students to make up that time? So then the next major theme was social and emotional, and this became the rest of the conversation. At least 7 people spoke about this. 2 people in chat talked about this. A real worry about social and emotional in terms of their own children, that students are struggling. Please, as a system, do something to help out these students. It's what students are missing are the peers, interactions with peers, and we have to weigh academics with social and emotional considerations. I'm just going to read this whole comment. It was hard to know what students were struggling with prior to COVID. Anxiety and other issues were high before, and now at the high level of isolation, and we don't know about this because many are silent. So worrying about mental health problems, and as more months go on, more children would be affected. The person said, I'm more concerned with mental health than with the virus at this point. And then there were quite a few people talking about the worry of students who are achieving well, but socially and emotionally suffering, and then students who were just having just trouble across the board. And then finally, this person is a teacher who's a parent, and also brought up the fact that of concern about the health of teachers across the state. Saying nobody's talking about teachers, and the adults are vulnerable here too, and the teachers have to teach 3 different models. It's overwhelming, head spinning. And so I guess I tried to get the major themes, but I would ask that if Amy and Mike have anything to add to this, that they would add to it. I would like to say beforehand that this was, it was a very fruitful listening session. Parents were very respectful. As upset as they were, that upset wasn't directed toward administration or toward school committee. I think it's more the situation that all of us find ourselves in, and parents being advocates for their own children.
Thank you, Mary. I think that was great. Oh, Mike, did you want to add something?
I just want to follow up. Mary, I think you did an awesome job. I wouldn't add anything. I think you did fantastically. I mean, you represented every single opinion I think that was offered to us. The only thing I would add is I had a number of parents reach out as a follow-up, thanking us for providing us with this kind of platform. And this is the second time we've done this in a couple of months, and I think that it is very much appreciated. But other than that, Mary, you were stellar.
Great, thank you. Leah.
All right, so there are so many things that are similar across the board. And so I was also joined by my fellow Stow reps in hosting this listening session. And Jen D'Entremont was also with us that day, and probably 12, I don't know, guys, correct me here because we did not do a head count. I'm not as good as Mary. Maybe 20 people total. Rich says thumbs up to that. So they were mostly high school people, high school parents. So the first thing that I want to say is that there was kind of unconditional acknowledgement of the hard work that all of our Nashoba staff is engaged in. And everybody made a point to chime in on this, that from, every single employee in our amazing district we recognize as residents and parents, that they are just doing an enormous amount of work, no matter what model they're in. It's just a lot of work, and you guys are not giving up. And despite all of the difficulty, you're persevering, and we really appreciate it. It's also important to recognize that any kind of discourse that might seem to be the opposite of what others might want is not a slight against all of the great work that's being done. It's just a difference of opinion. And so there was a lot of expression of that, even in emails after the meeting to us. So thanking our district for all the hard work. So a couple of things that came up in our meeting were around the timeline for implementation and criteria for pivoting. That's going to be addressed tonight in some of the materials. So that's great. There also was a few questions around the so-called full return option and whether or not a plan has been articulated for that. And some people were questioning why was it the question in the survey if the parents weren't given a plan. So there was, some people thought that there was some discord there, but I think that we're going to talk about a full return option tonight in some of the materials. So there you go. There was a big question around what resources are needed to move toward a hybrid system. Will there be any budgetary impacts, like needing more personnel, needing fewer personnel, that sort of a thing. There was also a question around whether or not we could engage in some kind of broad recruitment of substitutes in the parent pool. And I know that a couple of people actually volunteered to be subs if necessary in our listening sessions. So they were saying how perhaps that is something that we could do. I know that that's just another thing for you guys to do. So they're also very interested in understanding how the two plans compare with regard to instructional time. So similar to what Mary was saying. And will live streaming, a lot of people asked, or a couple of people asked if live streaming is on the table to kind of mitigate any of the difference. There was, of course, a conversation around mental health and the toll that isolation is taking on our kids. And that was of great concern to some people. There was also just another kind of tangential question, and it was around the testing, state testing at the high school or in the district, and whether or not that will come online at the same time. If we were to go to hybrid, that might be a benefit. And I will ask my other reps if I missed anything, if you want to add to clarify. We spoke for about 80 minutes, by the way.
All
Good,
right.
good job, Leah.
Yes, thank you to Leah. Thank you to Mary. Without objection, I would like to actually let Steve and Jen and the high school sort of present their thing and then merge the deliberation into all of this into one. Brooke.
And I'm going to go through some considerations, and I think I should probably do that first before we turn it over to Steve to talk about the hybrid. So because it all kind of ties in together. Okay.
Sure, I guess.
So maybe Alita, I'll see if you can put that slide deck up, and I'll just try to go through it quickly because, to be honest with you, there's nothing new that's in here. It's just a case of putting it all together and kind of like one spot. I think one of the key things, I mean, we all know that nothing can replicate in class, face-to-face teaching. Like nothing is better than that magic that happens in the classroom, like nothing. And so, I mean, we're doing our very best along the way here to try to manage this in a way that's still, you know, and I know that our administrators have heard me say this a million times, how do we still keep joy alive, you know, as we're going through all of this? Because sometimes it can be pretty tough as we're working through this. So Alita, if you go into the second slide and then even right through to the third. So these are considerations that we talk about as an administrative team. And basically, when we took a look at the task forces in August, one of the things that we looked at was what is going to provide the most amount of stability for all of our kids, as many kids as we possibly could, moving forward into this school year. And so one of the things that we said, you know, we could see that there could be problems with the high school, which is of course one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we looked at doing that full remote, because we knew it was stabilizing. And that, you know, we probably would see, which is exactly what we've seen, schools having to shut for any number of reasons and reopen, and that kind of like up and down. And Steve and I remember had these discussions. We said one of the strengths that will come with a full remote is that it should be just a steady pace, a steady stream of academic rigor. And of course, at that point in time, you know, we talked about all the other things, like we really didn't want to get into third-party vendors. There were all kinds of things. But going back to the task forces, they said, you know, let's try to make sure that whatever models that we put into place, we have the ability to try to keep those models in place so that we've got as much in-school learning as possible for as long as we can, so that we're not going back and forth and toggling between models. So I just wanted to put that up there, because the truth is we all know that nothing is as good as the magic in a classroom. Can you go to the next slide, Alita, please? So, you know, one of the things, of course, that we all want is the full return, you know, for any model. And I think it's really important for people to realize that I mean, the high school, for all intents and purposes, could go from a full remote to a full return. What does that look like, right? But I think that sometimes people think you have to go through like that hybrid model as well. That's not necessarily true. So, you know, and again, keep in mind that education is determined locally. So it really falls to our school committee, right, to make the decision of what models. But please don't think that you have to go through those the model of, you know, full remote to hybrid to, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, for example, we're not here right now, but for example, if the vaccine had been rolled out in, I don't know, November, and everybody, and enough had been made, and we were all ready to take part in it, and it was really good, we could have maybe moved to a full return in February. Now that's not where we are, but I'm just saying when the conditions are right, then you look and say, yeah, we're ready. It's safe. We can do this. And when it's safe for staff and students, right? Because we're looking at both. So when we look at the full return from any model, one of the things that we really need to think about is the DESE and CDC guidelines. For example, busing. Busing is still problematic as long as the current transportation requirements are in place. And it's not something that, oh my gosh, we cannot overcome this. But for us to go to a full return, we almost need that piece to fall off in order to have a smooth level of transporting our kids from home to school. So some of those guidelines are going to have to be waived or removed before we can ever get back into a full return mode. And of course, when the NRSD school committee agrees to that full return with no or with limited precautions in place is what we need to do, then that's what we'll do. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, Alita, so you can maybe just leave your cursor there. Thanks. One of the, if you take a look at full remote or partial full remote at grade level, I want to just talk about that because I think, you know, early on, I think our thinking has evolved so much since the beginning of the school years. We've grown with this and learned about it and witnessed and experienced some of the issues that we're experiencing, and staffing is one of them. And I was thinking, Anne Marie, is those people that said that they would sign up in Stow should connect with Anne Marie right away, and let's see if we can get them signed up. Because our problem is that although sometimes we might lose one or two teachers, we have been in the situation now in our district, not once, but at least twice that I can think of, where we've lost large groups of staffing. One night, we lost 11 staff members from one building. One night, we lost 17 from one building. Now, in both cases, we were able to continue, because we continue to try to say first, what can we do to keep that school still going so that we're not going to a full remote? So we're doing everything we can. The principals, there was an expression that a superintendent made the other day, said, we're turning ourselves inside out like a pretzel. And I think that holds true for our principals too, as they try to figure out, how do we get around this when we lose so many staff because of quarantine, because of COVID positivity rate or whatever. Now, in our case, when both times that we lost large groups, they were around one program. And so we were able to just shut that one part of the school down, that one program, but continue on with the rest of it. So lack of staff is still continues to be, as one of our principals said the other day, the biggest stressor every morning. You wake up and you don't know what you're going to deal with for your staff. Because the other thing to think about is this is not just quarantine and COVID, but you've got other illnesses out there. You've got flu season coming on here, and there are other contractual elements, whether it's doctor's visits or you know, whatever. And then we've got the FCCRA as well. So all those things come into play. So far, knock wood, we've managed to keep all of our buildings, I'm talking our middle and elementary, because the high school has been its own beast. It's just continued to march right along with really pretty solid attendance for both staff and students. So I'm really talking about the elementary and middle, because that's, of course, where we're seeing, either staff or students fall off for periods of time. The student and staff, in terms of the transmission itself right now, we as a school district don't make the call to say there's been a case of a transmission from staff to student or student to staff or staff to staff or student to student. We don't make that call. And I know we've taken a little bit of heat on that because people have said, well, why aren't you making that call? Why aren't you sending out a memo that says that this happened? We would, if our medical professionals who guide us tell us that. But when they say there's not enough here that we can make a call on, then there is no verified transmission as such, and there's nothing for us to report out on. The number of students affected is not necessarily part and parcel of if we have to close down a portion of the school or not, depending on how it plays out, but there's so many variables with that. For example, if we had, let's say there are 10 children in the classroom and 5 of them were a cluster, then we would have to look differently at it, right? So there are all these variables that are at play when you decide if you're going to go into a full remote or a partial full remote. When I talk about partial full remote, it could mean like the entire grade 6 has to shut down, but we can keep grade 7 and 8 running, but we can't keep 6. Or we lose like 25 staff and they're across the different grade levels and we can't possibly man it. Those are times when we're going to have to look at some type of a full remote. The state mandate is another thing that comes into play. Right now, I quite frankly would be surprised if we get a state mandate, because I think they really want us to keep these schools open as much as we possibly can, and we understand that. So I'll be surprised if we see another state mandate like we did in March, but you don't know. And with the trajectory right now of COVID, it's really hard to predict. So I would not be foolish enough to say here, we won't see one or we will see one. I don't know where that's going to go. I think the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that this is just such a fluid situation. It's difficult to predict. Even in our own office, the central office, I mean, like any office would feel it. You know, we look at somebody, for example, like, one office has somebody out right now being tested. If that person comes back positive, it could certainly affect that whole department. We've got another whole department where we've had somebody quarantine, just came back from quarantine, and somebody else just went out positive. You had me out for 14 days for quarantining because I'd been in close contact. I mean, you're seeing this right throughout the administration building as much as you are in the schools as well. So it's a fluid situation. It's difficult to predict. There are additional elements that can factor into any of this at any point in time. So for us to sit down and say, here are clear metrics. I was reading with interest the Amherst Pelham, I think is the Amherst Pelham situation, because I think that they did do some tighter metrics, and I think it was them. A school district recently, was that who it was? I can't remember. Yeah, it was. And so we don't want to do that. We know that when we can no longer staff a building, we're going to have to close it. We're going to have to go down to a full remote model. And that's really the bottom line. Next slide there, please, Lita. If it's a COVID decision, if it's a COVID specific decision, I'm not talking quarantining, I'm talking COVID specific. All of that is verified and discussed at length with our Nashoba boards of health, the Mass DPH, and our own NRSD doctor. So those are the players that continuously help to guide us. Other possible conditions. Now I talked about staff groupings as one, like I said, you know, we had one school that lost 11. The other situation though, is it's also possible, we've come close to a time when we thought, oh my gosh, we might have to shut something down because of one person. So previously I've talked about groupings, but there's also the possibility that you may have one person that interacts with a lot of people in the school. And if that's the case, and that person is tested positively, then that also might bring us to a level where we might have to put the school into a full remote model. Now, all schools are ready to go to full remote. I know that the high school tonight, we're going to be talking just the opposite. We're going to talk, you know, the potential of moving it to a hybrid model. But just right at this moment in time, as we just come back from Thanksgiving and we just are going to come back from the winter break, I think the message I want to put out there is that we're ready. Our elementary and middle schools are ready to pivot. We've got plans in place. Each plan is a little bit different because each school is a little bit different, but we're all set to pivot if we need to. We of course hope that we don't have to. So those are just conditions and things that we think about when we look at you know, where we might have to pivot to, but know that our thinking always is to try to keep the kids and the staff in the buildings as long as we possibly can, as long as everybody is safe. So with that now, I'm going to go because it's kind of just the opposite now as we talk to the high school about taking the high school from a full remote model to a potential hybrid, and or do we leave it in the full remote? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Codianne and Jen Dontermont. Thank you, Jen. This is a long time for you to be sitting on screen with us tonight, so thank you very much. We appreciate both of you being here. And I know, Steve, you and your team have worked through countless models. And I know, Jen, you're on the task force as well, if memory serves me right? And so I know that you've looked, at one point in time, we thought we had a model that we were going to kind of like the most, and that was kind of the model that we were going to go to. But with time, we started playing, and we being you really started playing with it and said, wait a minute, can we look at this a little bit differently? I think, there were so many strengths that we saw with the full remote model, the fact that the kids got to see their teachers every single day, all those kinds of things. And I'm sure you're going to speak to that tonight. But we know that we have to give to get. I mean, there's just no perfect picture in all of this. And I really appreciated, Elaine, that as you laid things out this morning, or at the beginning of the meeting rather, there's just nothing perfect about this. And we cannot lose sight of the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic still, with a trajectory that's still going through the roof. With that said, though, we'll turn it over to Principal Colleen and Jen Donchamont. So talk to us about the model and just walk us through it quickly, please.
Thank you, Jen, for helping out here too. Alita, can you just put the survey up first? I'll start with that. Alita.
See if is she there? Alita, can you hear us?
Usually just takes a minute or two.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. I am working on it.
I know.
There you go. She is so patient with us.
I'm at the ready if we have a glitch, so we're good.
Survey itself is pretty self-explanatory. There were 1,185 people who responded. We had 52.5% wanted to continue with the remote model that we're in now. There were 32.6% that wanted to go to a hybrid model, and 14.9% that were looking to go to a full return model. More than half feel that what we're doing is the right thing, and that probably has something to do with the situation that we're in right now with COVID jumping through the roof as well. I think it's not a bad idea to try to have one of these once a month to see where families stand. So I don't have a problem doing that. We also because our teachers are part of our group, we polled them as well, and that was far different. It was 97.5. What we were doing was correct, as opposed to 2%, or 97.5. About 3% wanted something else. Can you go to that slide, the slide deck now, Alita, please? I hope you folks all took a look at the video, because my team worked exceptionally hard on the video. We sent that video out to all the families before we sent the survey out, so that they had a good idea of what we were talking about when we went through this. I'm not going to go through every slide, because if you've seen it, you've already know what the slides are about. So I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit. But as Superintendent Clinchy said, we went through about 20 different iterations of this schedule that we came through. The APs, both John Crowell and Janine Belay, were getting in touch with other schools in our area. They attempted to go visit some of these schools that were in hybrid models. Most wouldn't let them, because they're not allowing visitors in their building if you're not a member of the school. But they were able to talk to them and give us some ideas, and the ideas were good ideas, and then we kind of adapted them to what we thought was the best idea for us. If you could go to the third slide, Alita, which is essentially just the schedule, and it's going to be a pain in the neck because we did it so that we could talk through all these. So you have to click it a few times to get there. These really smart assistant principals know how to do these things. They make them look very professional. And Matt Biggs as well, because he's very smart with this stuff too. Keep going to the next one. This is essentially the schedule, and ultimately what this schedule does. Oh, went too far. It's probably taken off on its own. Ultimately, what the schedule does is it gives all three of the pods same amount of teacher time. I'll walk you through. Pod A would meet Monday and Tuesday in the morning with live instruction. In cohorts B and cohort remote would be asynchronous. And during that asynchronous period, they'd be working on individual work for the most part, because the teachers are teaching the students live. In the afternoon, cohorts R and cohorts B, who are asynchronous in the morning, would then be taught by the teachers live remote in the afternoon. Same teachers, same classes. And these students are all in the same teachers, same classes. It doesn't change. So that would go through the day. Thursday, Friday would be cohort B live, and cohort A and R would be in the afternoons. It seemed the most fair to everybody. We were concerned, we didn't want the remote group to lose out, because I think we still believe that the remote learning is the best model that we can use at this point. But this seems to be the most fair for everybody involved, and we're not having to go out to third-party vendors to teach any of the kids.
And that's really huge. That part there is absolutely huge, because we're hearing a lot of different stories right now about the third-party vendors, and we're so glad that we stayed with the full remote to start with and didn't ever get into the third-party business. So I give your team full credit for coming up with this particular model that avoided that.
And that being said, part of our job here was to put together a hybrid model. But while we were doing that, we needed to look at a full return, because the state was telling us that we might have to come back in full return. So we also looked at that, and essentially coming back in a full return, it would be drastically different than what this would look like. Everybody would be back except for those that wanted to stay in remote. And at that point, we would have to go to a third-party vendor to teach those remote kids, because you can't teach both at the same time. That's part of the issue. Alita, could you go to the last slide? I mean, they're all really good charts, and I feel bad I'm not going over them with you guys. We explained them all very well in the video, so I don't want to waste your time either. It's going to take a little while. I'm sorry about that.
I really think that they did a great job with the video, and I loved how they did the overlay, especially with the schedule, because I found that so much easier to understand than if you just take a look at like the very slide that you presented right now, Steve. I found that with the overlay, it just put it all together really, really smartly. So thank you for, if you can extend our thanks to them, they did a great job with it.
Absolutely, and I can't thank them enough. They're just a great team. They work very hard.
They are.
And because when you clicked on it, they essentially, as you saw, they put them things in, and they would explain where they're going. It made it a little bit easier to understand. This last thing is essentially a comparison of the plans, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it looks at the schedule, how the schedule works, and what program implications that will become because of it. So that's essentially our presentation here tonight.
I'll probably be done.
Alita, we can hear you. Alita? There we go. Sorry, I didn't know if she wanted her phone call streamed live.
That's all I have. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Let's just talk about time frame and what you were thinking about this for time frame, and then Jen, we want to turn it over to you for I think for some reflections, I think, as much as anything. So Steve, we'd always talked about the fact that we thought we should do this at a natural time break, right?
Correct, and that would more than likely be the end of the first semester, which would be mid to late January. And then move forward from there into February. But again, this is all dependent upon where we stand with COVID at that point. But I think that the best idea to move into a hybrid model would be at the semester break, because it'll give us the time to get ourselves prepared, bring the kids back in again. Unless anything changes. I mean, that's we have to understand that things could change drastically, not knowing what the vaccines are going to do and whatnot. So,
thanks, Steve. So, Jen, some reflections from you and just takeaways.
Well, thank you for letting me come tonight. I appreciate it. I enjoyed also attending the Stow listening session as a Stow resident of 27 years. So, thank you very much. I have to articulate and say what Steve said. Our administrative team has worked incredibly hard, including Steve and our 2 APs and Matt Biggs. Also, they've included the building association reps. Of course, I am one of those as well. It has been an incredible team effort. A lot of stakeholders had a voice. From an instructional perspective, I would agree that I still see the remote model right now as a teacher being the best instructional model for us. However, with the desire for the community to pursue the hybrid schedule, I do believe that this schedule is the best that we could have to maintain the relationships with the students that we have already established starting in the beginning of the year. So much of teaching in the beginning of the year is creating community. And I think that this model serves so many of the populations well because we don't have to go to that outside vendor, and our students get to remain with us. So those relationships that we've worked so hard to build since the beginning of the year will remain intact. Like you said, Brooke, we're in an unusual time period and nothing is perfect, but I believe in this hybrid model. I think it's an excellent model. I did my own research. I've not seen another school with a model like this that has been able to serve all stakeholders. I know there was a lot of concern in our committee to make sure that the families that continue to choose remote don't feel like they're getting, second best, and that we can continue to serve those families that feel comfortable and would like to continue in the remote model. And I see that this does this very well. And I'm happy to answer any questions as a teacher.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, okay. So thank you all very much. It's so clear how much work has gone into both the development of the plans and just the execution of the first half of the year overall. So I'm going to open it up now to questions or comments from the committee. So if you want to raise your hand, I have a little sheet here where I can keep track of to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk on this one. So who would like to start? What? Well, this is unusual. Rich, why don't you go ahead?
I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about how the trade-offs that we get to move to this hybrid model, specifically around how much more work it's going to be for the teachers, what maybe remote students are maybe missing or losing, because right now of all remote folks get synchronous learning all the time. Obviously that's probably not going to happen in this new model. So I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
The biggest thing that people lose going to the hybrid model is the asynchronous time.
Mm-hmm.
The asynchronous time right now is being used by the teachers as an opportunity to do extra help with students. It's an opportunity to do some SEL work with students. In the hybrid model, the teachers will be teaching during the time that the other students are in their asynchronous time. So they won't get that type of thing. And within the hybrid model, because we're seeing students pretty much every day in the remote model, and in the hybrid model, it would be really they'd only see their class teacher live once a week, because it would just be in the mornings, and we're rotating the schedule around a little bit. So the curriculum would absolutely slow down in a hybrid model, much slower than it is in the remote model we're in right now. Jen, if you want to add to that, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. Absolutely. I for one, I might have said in the very beginning when I was first here at the school committee in the beginning of the year, I didn't know what was going to happen. And of course I was nervous about this new style of instruction, but I truly feel that I've grown personally and professionally. One of the things that I valued the most during this unusual time is the asynchronous time of teaching, which allows for me to connect with students in a way that I've noticed serves a particular subset of a student population that I never thought about in the same way, meaning that I have students who stay with me during my asynchronous days, sometimes just to hang out and talk or to ask me questions. I set up conferencing during the asynchronous days. Of course, it's voluntary. I have my facing history students right now working on a research project. And so I have conferencing going on with them on the asynchronous days, which is really essential, one-on-one time to check in on progress. That would be lost. And that, I think we've all created such a wonderful routine. The students know now when I'm available and how they can stay and check in with me on a very regular basis. In terms of pacing, it absolutely will slow down pacing. It will. I've been able to maintain pacing for my curriculum in all 5 classes with the model that we're in right now. And we're picking, we're in a groove. I mean, humans, we adapt fairly well. I don't mean that there's not negatives to a model during a pandemic. Absolutely. But kids are in the groove. We're adapting. We're doing the best that we can, and they're liking the routine. So this instructional model with the hybrid would change that, because I would only see them in person, like live in person, like Steve said, once a week, and then they would rotate into a synchronous, virtual format. What would miss then would be the opportunity to meet with me one-on-one, unless their free periods aligned with my free periods, or we met early in the morning, back at 7:30, or after school. And Nashoba students are very busy. They're very involved in so many different things. And, meeting after school isn't always the ultimate choice. So this asynchronous time right now has been fantastic in terms of giving the kids the opportunity to meet with me during their school day for extra help. Like I said, just for some fun socialization or talking about cool videos about psychology. It's really been a wonderful experience.
Thanks a lot for, I guess I didn't say at the top of this, and forgive me if I did. I can tell a lot of time and work was put into this. So I just wanted to say explicitly that I appreciate that.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you.
To everybody. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Steve Rubenstein.
Okay. Jen, thank you very much for being here with us this evening. It's always good to hear what a teacher has to say. And the question I have for you is, what things have you learned, or what techniques have you developed during this fully remote time period that you would be willing or want to carry over into a fully returned situation?
That's a great question. I've learned a lot more about digital tools that allow for students to show progress and demonstrate mastery that I didn't know before. I've learned ways in which I can creatively design lessons that students can work on their own time, that then we can come back together as a group, and I can use what we call in education formative assessment, check-in, to see how students are doing. One of the things that I've been using a lot that I could transfer to when we go back to, the real world post-pandemic, is a lot of polling features. And I've been using a lot of polling in class to check in with students, surveys using Google Forms, to get their, thoughts, opinions, checking in terms of SEL. There's some great things I use, like what's draining your bucket, what's filling your bucket. Polling is wonderful because it can be anonymous, so students can share their thoughts and their classmates don't necessarily need to see their names. A feature that I've used quite a bit is something called Padlet, which I could easily see transferring to the in-person classroom, in which students can participate from their device. It would be projected, creates a virtual bulletin board, and they can then react quite quickly to a question or a prompt that I ask, and then everybody can see the responses, like flood the screen, which is really cool. I get to save those so I can go through them later. They can be anonymous, or I can ask them to use their name. I've done some really interesting things where I've asked them to create neurons out of, I teach psychology, so we had to talk about the brain and neurons every day, where they were creating neurons out of materials, found materials, and they took pictures of them. And so they were able to display their work in a digital way. Also, I think one of the things that I've learned a lot is understanding that we have a lot of students that do experience some social anxiety in the classroom. And some of these digital tools have been a godsend for them, a savior for them, because they can participate with me and their classmates in a way that lowers that anxiety. And taking these tools, and hopefully next year, when the pandemic is under control, I'll be able to then incorporate those in my classroom on a regular basis, so that I continue that momentum and I continue to serve those students that don't want to sit in a big classroom of 30 kids and raise their hand, but they could do that thoughtfully on a device and still feel like they're part of the group. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I'll add to that as well.
Todd, I hope you're writing all this down, Todd.
We had a number of teachers at the beginning of the year that were fearful of technology, and I have to give kudos to the faculty because they supported one another. They taught each other how to work with these things. And right now, I have a really good feeling about all of the faculty knowing a lot more technology than they knew before. And it was scary for some of them. I'm an old buck, and I'm not real good with technology, but I'm learning a lot of stuff now too. And I think this is going to be helpful down the road for these guys. I think all the teachers have learned quite a bit from this. So.
And I want to say that, thanks, Steve. And I want to say to Todd and his team in teaching and learning, they've been great because we've been finding things that we want to use, and we send an email, and then they do the due diligence and making sure that it's safe and approved. And then we get the download from teaching and learning, and we can get in and find out which new tools have been approved, which things we like to learn, and what kind of site licenses we can buy with the appropriate protections in for students and families. And that's been amazing. I mean, there's so many great things out there that we didn't necessarily always use. And one more thing I want to say, I'm sorry, is that a lot of the time we also have to remember that we have students with different learning needs, and we have students that are ELL students with IEPs and 504s, and some of these digital tools really benefit them in terms of their ability to participate and thrive in the classroom. So I wanted to mention that as well. Google Translate is a gem. So
Thank you. Amy, you've been waiting.
Thank you, Elaine. I wanted to take an opportunity to thank Mr. Cullinane, Ms. D'Entremont, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, and the task forces for putting so much work and effort into presenting this updated hybrid plan. I mean, it's obvious that people really put a lot of time and energy into and thought and research into coming up with a better hybrid model to consider. And the video was really very helpful in explaining the new proposal. I mean, because it's a lot to wrap your head around when you're looking at the slides and you see the picture of the schedule. I mean, it's a lot. So the video was very professionally done and much appreciated. So I want to make sure I say that. I also wanted to make sure that we highlight some of the pros or the benefits associated with a hybrid model, because I feel like this discussion is talking about the remote plan more than the hybrid plan that's being proposed. And just, I was interested to hear that Mrs. D'Entremont?
You can D'Entremont.
Okay, thank you.
You can just call me Jen.
It's interesting because when I saw the hybrid proposal, I thought that having a student come into school once a week to see their teacher would actually improve the opportunities for one-on-one meeting with the teacher. And so I think it's, it's kind of a matter of perspective.
Sure.
I saw that as a benefit of the hybrid model, and that each student is actually getting one time a week in person with their teacher to talk about an issue.
So I can answer that, Amy. I appreciate that perspective as well. But I also want to say, I want people to consider that, we are connecting. School is open. I'm teaching every day. It's just a different modality than we're all used to. But we are working. School is open. I have relationships with my students. We laugh, we joke, we connect, and it's different, but it's not that different. And having them in the building, of course, I mean, there's nothing more that I would like than to see my students in person. In fact, this afternoon, as I was leaving, there was a bunch of kids coming in and picking up materials. And we were laughing and joking, my seniors, that I saw about this dancing hair cell video that I showed them today about the ear. That aside, what would be different is the requirements that the CDC imposes upon coming into the building. And in terms of one-on-one instruction, I would still have other students in the classroom, right? So it would be difficult in many ways, unless I broke down the lesson and I was working one-on-one with each kid as they were working on something individual. Group work would be very different. Group work right now happens because it's safe and they can use breakout rooms and they work together. Group work in an in-person setting would probably look very similar because they'd still have to be behind their screens, separated in the classroom. Our students are very good at digital tools and working together in a virtual environment. It's their life. That's how they socialize, even without a pandemic. I think it would be wonderful to see them, absolutely. I don't necessarily say that it would be better. That's my perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only other point I wanted to make is that, the survey results, in my view, I think it's important to note that there's half of the survey respondents are showing some preference for in-person learning. And in-person learning options were split into two choices. So, I'm not sure that point was made, and I think it's an important point to consider, that we've got half of the people showing preference for an in-person model and half showing preference for the existing model. And that's not directed to you. That's directed to.
No, I know. I'm just nodding. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, that is an important point, Amy. Thank you. Mike, you've had your hand up.
Hi, thank you. Again, Jen and Steve, and certainly everyone who's on the task force that put the model together. I mean, I know that scheduling in a normal year is a beast. Scheduling in a COVID year is a beast times 1,000. So my hat really goes off to those of you that worked on this. I want to start by making a comment about the slideshow that the superintendent offered, and then ask a question about the proposed hybrid model. So first off, I think when we develop these kinds of considerations for any sort of pivot from one model to another, we really do have to walk a fine line. And admittedly, my view of what this document could and should entail has evolved to some degree over the past several weeks to a month or so. So on the one hand, while we should be cautious about committing to an overly specific set of circumstances, and that's mostly because we can't anticipate all the scenarios and therefore we might not even be able to plan for them, we also want to be as specific as we can so that the document can be used as a robust reference tool for administrators, for teachers, for parents, for students, because they should be able to understand with a certain degree of specificity what goes into a major decision like a teaching model pivot. So with all due respect, I personally don't feel that the document that was presented is specific enough to meet the concerns that the motion and the subsequent discussions from the October 22nd sought to address. We are beginning on that path with what has been presented, but I don't think we're close enough to walk that fine line. Again, this is just my opinion. And I know that committing to circumstances is a challenge, but it can be done. Other districts have done it with more pointed criteria. And there is, in my opinion, a clear need for these criteria to be shared out with, again, that higher level of specificity. So just my reflections on that. The second point is more of a question to Jen and to Steve. So what was presented to us we were presented with a lot of the detractions of the hybrid model, a loss of curricular density and continuity and fluidity, the inability to maybe manage absences due to transmission, maybe the need for a third-party vendor, the cost of the third-party vendor. From what I understand, and this was just after looking at this last week, that remote learners wouldn't start their synchronous learning until the afternoons, and the comments that Jen brought up. So other than the fact that this satisfies what about 48% of respondents requested, it almost feels like we're presenting, but we're also presenting an indictment on this model. And I'm wondering if there are things about this model that you would actually endorse, that actually are things that we would encourage to pursue and things that we could be optimistic about rather than what we would be losing.
When we put the model together, when we put the video together, we tried very specifically not to be biased to one side or the other. So and I apologize if I'm being a little bit more biased in this conversation.
Right.
But in our video that we sent out for the survey, we went through it 5 or 6 times to make sure that we weren't trying to bias the topic. So I don't agree with your premise that we sent out a biased document.
No, I didn't mean that the document was biased. I meant that.
But that's what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just finish what I was want to say?
Sure.
What I was trying to say, and I apologize if I misspoke, it feels like the way that's being presented now is clearly more in support of a remote model than a potential new hybrid model. That's all. I thought the presentations were outstanding, actually.
Well, it's hard for us to if we believe that the remote model is the better model, when you're asking us questions, it's hard for us to come out and say that the hybrid model is the better model. I honestly, and I think Jen honestly believes that this remote model that we're in right now is the best educational tool we have at this moment in the situation that we're in. So we are biased, and I apologize for that.
I think so, Mike. I think Jen did bring up several points earlier, like just minutes ago, about why this was the best hybrid model that. So I think I would disagree. I think Jen, you did bring up. Did I miss that? Maybe I misunderstood. I thought that you did bring up some points there.
Oh, I did. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd also thank you, Brooke and Steve. I'd also like to correct you. I believe it was 52%, Mike, in our survey results, not 48.
Okay, my mistake.
I am, research is my background and numbers do matter. I think the very best thing about the hybrid model is seeing the students in the building. And I know yourself, you're a teacher as well. So we got into this career because we want to teach. I'm still teaching. And I'm still teaching. I am still a teacher, whether I'm in face-to-face contact with students in my room 258 at Nashoba Regional High School, or I'm in room 258 using my laptop to communicate and connect with students. The very best thing about the hybrid would be seeing those children who choose to come into the building, come into the building. Absolutely. And aside from that, instructionally, I do see the remote model we're currently in as superior to the pacing that would change in the hybrid model. It doesn't mean that myself and my colleagues would not be able to adjust. If you know anything about me, I am passionately in support of my colleagues. From our administrative team to my co-teachers to every facet of people that work in that building. And together we would make that work. But if you do remember the staff survey results, we overwhelmingly voted to stay in support of our remote model. And to think that all of us in the very beginning of the year had absolutely no idea how we were going to manage pandemic teaching. And now we're doing it. So yeah, there are advantages, but like you said, you know, we have preferences as professionals. And in this case, if the pandemic was over tomorrow, I'd be like, oh yeah, bring them all back in the building. I can't wait to pack 30 kids back in my classroom again. I would love every minute of it. But right now, given what's going on, that's, you know, currently my preference would be remote.
I'm just going to jump in for a second. So one, I think it's perfectly fair for our educators to make a recommendation to bring before the school committee. That's their job. The school committee's job is to poke holes in that, or to try to poke holes in that, to ask questions. And ultimately, we take a vote and the decision becomes ours. Jen did mention the survey results. Yeah, 97% of the teachers said that they would prefer to stay in full remote. So I don't want to speak for the teachers, but I can imagine it might be hard to have brought a teacher here tonight that was a strong proponent of the hybrid model. When you look at those numbers, when you look at parents and students in the survey. Oh, and I should mention that Amy, thank you to you for breaking down the results even further for us today. If you looked at the results, students versus parents separately, the breakdown was almost exactly the same. It was like within a percentage point for each of the categories: in-person, hybrid, and remote. So there is not a big difference according to this survey based on what the students and the parents preferred. That when you see something that's 50-50, then you imagine that there's going to be a give and take, push and pull, whatever you want to call it, a really difficult decision, because it looks like exactly half of the people prefer one way and exactly half of the people prefer the other way. So I just think that's what we're seeing some here in the discussion tonight. But again, I just want to remind everybody that, you know, there's differences of opinion on policy here, and hopefully none of this is personal. All right, so I'm going to go back to the discussion here. Leah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Elaine, for setting us our course better. So first of all, I just want to applaud the architects of this plan. It is really creative. It addresses the needs of so many people, so many stakeholders. I was really impressed when I looked at all of it. This is basically something that I haven't seen before in all the different models. So kudos to you guys. This is great. Kind of nobody goes without in this arrangement. So it's awesome. I just wanted to, Elaine, ask a quick question, and then I had a couple of points to make. So my question is really clarifying. Looking at the data, if we have 52% of the people who want to stay full remote, and this is for Steve, I guess, or maybe Brooke, if 52% of the people want to stay full remote, then doesn't that kind of solve our problem, where then 48% could just be full in person?
I don't think it does, because I think if we did go back hybrid, I think some of the 52% would probably come back hybrid as well. So we can't know until we make that decision and find out how many people are actually coming back.
And we had this exact same discussion the other day, Leah. So you're thinking like we actually asked that question of ourselves and worked through the answer. So it's a great question, yeah, because we're not really sure, which is why, you know, we need this decision really by the end of this month, if it's not tonight, the next meeting, so that we can send out right away and say, okay, exactly who's coming in, so we know, because, you know, the busing pieces and all those other pieces that will have to start to gel together right away, right? So so it's critical for us to know.
You would think that, so what you're basically saying is that kind of, while it's theoretical, 52% of the people want to stay home, but once we like kind of construct this hybrid program, you anticipate that more kids would choose hybrid?
We don't know. No, what we're saying is we don't know. We're not anticipating that. But we're saying we don't know.
Let's say that they did, that 52% said, you know what, we're just going to stay home. So could then 48% come on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in the mornings?
I don't want to say anything until we know what numbers we're dealing with.
You're talking about probably 600 kids. So that would be like coming back full.
But isn't that half? No, I mean, I don't mean to belabor the point. I just
We've
thought,
got- we've got about 900 kids in the high school. So half of that would be 450 kids. So 450
many.
kids all at the same time, that wouldn't work, even if it was 50-50 split.
got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an interesting idea. I think it's a bit of a catch-22 there, and we saw the same thing with K-8, is that you can't really know if it would work without like having a binding decision for families, but you also don't want to make them make a binding decision without the school committee approving a model of instruction. And you kind of
Right.
want to spin that circle around and around.
All right. So we'd probably still have, like, no matter how many kids like head toward hybrid, if it's half, it's a little more than half, we're still going to need this cohort ABR. So here comes my couple of points that I'm really speaking to my committee members here and thinking through this. So the biggest concern that we see is that most students would lose instructional time. So right now in the schedule that is on the high school's webpage, the students have 3 days of synchronous learning. They have 2 days of asynchronous learning. The hybrid plan as proposed would give them the same amount. So that said, I don't actually think that there would be any loss in synchronous teaching time because those asynchronous days are the same number. And so that just laying that out there. AP classes, in my opinion, and I'm an AP teacher, I don't want that to drive our decision making at all. I know that AP classes are important. I also know that these are the students who need the least assistance because they're college level classes. And so I would hate to see any of our decision making being driven by AP classes. And I apologize to my AP scholars out there. That is my position. Half of the year so far has been spent in full remote. And it's like Jen said, it's going well enough. But 50% of the kids don't want that, and 50% of the families don't want that. And so half of the year in hybrid sounds like a really fair compromise to me between maximizing instructional time and meeting the mental health needs of our kids, especially considering half the population wants it. So I think we need to listen to that. Above and beyond, the mental health of our kids has to be, I think, a key factor in our decision making. And when you hear half of your constituents telling you, we need hybrid, this is something that we need to listen to, even if that asynchronous conferencing time, which is really nice, has to go after school, right? Like that will have to happen after school like it has in previous years as after school help, or on Wednesdays after the half day, perhaps after PD, which is what I'm doing. I've also, I'm going to leave my last point out because I know that it's controversial. So that's what I wanted to say about this particular hybrid schedule. I really, really appreciate it. I really do. I think that it is, like Jen said, the very best hybrid schedule we could have hoped for you guys to design. I am so appreciative and I support it. So thanks.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that. I was just going to say, we haven't heard from any of our Lancaster representatives, and then I see Sharon with her hand up. So Sharon, why don't you go ahead?
So I was just wanting to put out an alternate perspective to what Leah was saying about the time staying the same in terms of the synchronous and asynchronous time that students have now, and the synchronous and asynchronous time that students would have on the hybrid model. Because although if you look at it by the numbers on paper, that is true. But when you get into the actual, I'm not quite sure what the word I'm looking for is, but when you get actually into it, it's not the same. Because on the hybrid model, those students on the times that their classes are asynchronous will not have an opportunity to connect with their teachers. In the model as it stands, when those students are in their asynchronous classes, they do have an opportunity to connect with their teachers. So in essence, although on paper it looks the same, I don't think that it actually is the same. I think that they will lose opportunities to connect with teachers, and that will be a trade-off of going to a hybrid and of taking the in-person in-school time. I did appreciate that document showed the downsides as well. It showed both sides, the pros and the cons of the hybrid and remote model. And I appreciated that it showed them side by side, because I think that we really, everyone, school committee members, parents, everyone needs to really know what the trade-offs are for each model, so that whatever we end up with, we are not, I think it's could be a grass is always greener scenario, where it's always great to look at the other side and say, wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be better? But when you actually get there, it may or may not be. And I think that we needed to know what the pros and cons are, so that we know what the trade-off is. And, another thing that I'm just thinking about is that I think that there are opportunities that have not yet been able to be fully explored in terms of creating that social connection for kids. We just have not had the time or the resources to explore yet, because we are debating back and forth what to do, hybrid, remote. And I'd like, before committing to one way or another, I'd like to kind of explore that a little bit more. And this is probably not the right time to do that. I'm not asking that to happen right now. I'm just simply saying that if we're not putting the energy into creating a different plan, then can we put that energy and those resources into creating opportunities within the plan that we have? And maybe that's a little bit more nuanced, but might provide some more out of the box opportunities than a straightforward remote or hybrid scenario. So that's my 3 cents to add into that.
Thank you, Sharon. Much appreciated. How about Brett or Joe or Mary? This is the time where I'm going to go around and make sure that everyone's had a chance to say their piece before we go back for repeaters. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. From me, my perspective of this, it was a simple decision in August. And, I base it on my experience as a school committee representative, both in this district and my other district. And I'm going to ask the same question tonight through the chair to the principal that I asked on August 10th. Mr. Cullinan, what would be your recommendation this evening as we move forward?
My recommendation would be that we would stay in this remote hybrid model, because that seems to be what most of the families.
You said remote hybrid.
Correct. No, I'm the remote model that we're in right now. The
full
remote model that we're in right now.
Thank you.
Thank you for correcting me, Ms. Clinch.
I wasn't sure actually what you were thinking. So.
Oh, you know exactly what I'm thinking. Thank you for saving me.
All right. Would Mary or Brett like to add anything? Rich, I see you have your hand up. You started this whole conversation, so I just want to make sure that we've had one round first, and then I'll go back for more. Mary, I see you're off mute. Would you like to talk?
Sure. I was looking to see whether Brett wanted to go first. There's the variable here, the elephant in the room, so to speak. What will be the state of COVID at the end of first semester? If 1918 is any indication, and what is so amazing to me is that we're a lot further along in terms of science than in 1918. However, we seem to be following a lot of the arc of how the pandemic then progressed, and how it got worse, and how many more deaths there were. And hopefully we've got vaccines on the horizon. And so we have a lot more. We also know it's a virus. They thought it was bacterial and all. So there's some differences, but still, I'm not going to be ready to vote on this. Even 2 weeks would be a help to get some more time to see what is COVID going to do? Where are we going to be in COVID? But I certainly have ideas on this. I've said before that I taught in the virtual high school. So and it was asynchronous learning at that point. There was some, what would be called live streaming, or taped videos would be there. But what I can tell you is that I agree with the teachers. I agree with what Jen said. It is absolutely possible to teach very successfully, to build a classroom community, to have more and more ways to have the learning be visible because of the reliance on literacy, and because so much is cooperative, the group work, etc. You don't find that some students would be shirking because with a lot of the tools that we have, you can see what students are doing. Also, I almost did my doctoral dissertation on online learning and on reflection, because the opportunities for reflection in online learning are just, omnipresent all over the place. And with the tools that we have now, it brings so many students to the fore, and not just the students who are the ones who have a hand raised and know exactly what the teacher wants to hear and answer the questions. And I love those students. Maybe I was one of those students. However, there are lots of benefits to the remote learning. And I know that it works, and I know that it is working now. Is it working for all of our students? No. So I tried to boil down to what is the real crux. If we were to go hybrid, the trade-offs would seem to be the loss of the remote teacher 5-day time, and we're able to get more curricular coverage, or we could call it instructional time, versus real time and place, in-person teaching and learning. So you have the real teacher there. It's reduced to 1 day, less instructional time, less curricular coverage. But if we think back, and so I'm presenting both sides of this, in a sense, we think back to what Brooke started with, when she talked about the fact that there is nothing that can take the place of a real live person, a teacher. And I'm also saying some other things too, that I believe our teachers, with the stretching that they've done, and Jen has expressed it, and other teachers have, the tools that they have now, we used to talk about blended learning and how good that was. And some teachers dip their toes in. Everybody has been thrown into the deep end, and they've been swimming, and they've found things. So when we go back to fully in person, teaching and learning are going to be so expanded, so much better than they ever have been, that it's going to be to the benefit of everyone. If we think about the social and emotion, I really liked what Sharon said too, of putting a lot of time and attention into that, because that can be in both. But thinking about the remote and how we can even infuse more social and emotional learning, that would be time extremely well spent. But now I'm going to go back to hybrid. If there really is nothing that can take the place of a real live teacher in real time, in the same physical space, and I emphasize physical space for a reason that I can't talk about, because we can't talk about the MOA, but I'm just talking about being in a classroom, real teacher, real students, what can transpire there in terms of social, emotional, in terms of learning, especially with the tools that teachers, the increased tools that they have, really, brings hybrid up. And so it's a tough decision. And I understand why so many parents, when we think of the social emotional, we think of the real connections. We're connecting, all of us here, but it's not the same as if we were in person with each other, looking at each other, all the gestures, the body language, the eye contact. We can get a lot of it, but we can't get all of it. So there are trade-offs to each. And if we were to say yes to hybrid, I'd want there to be some kind of a caveat that if COVID has gone crazy, then obviously, our superintendent would say, we're going to have to pivot, and we're not going to do that right now. And that's why I'd rather not vote on it right now. But there are pros and cons to either. And we might be in the best place. I think maybe Leah said this, that we've already had quite a bit of time, almost half the year of remote at the high school, building those relationships and expectations. Maybe it would be okay if COVID could be somewhat under control. Maybe the best thing to do would be to go to hybrid for the rest of the year, realizing that there's going to be less instructional time, that we may not get as far in curricula, but what we could be making up in terms of personal relationships, in terms of peer-to-peer, the teacher to students. So I guess what I'm saying is how complex this is. And I understand people who want to know metrics. Do you want to know exactly what percentage of COVID we would have to be able to do such and such? It's just not that easy. But it is a factor. And if we are deep in COVID, then I don't want to do anything except stay with remote. If we really are starting to see the numbers COVID go down, then we might have to make the sacrifice of instructional time and less teacher instructional time and curricula, and go on the plus side of the human relationships and go to hybrid for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Mary. I think you perfectly encapsulated how complicated the situation is and how difficult of a decision that this actually is. So Brett, I don't want to pressure you. Is there anything that you would like to add to the discussion? All right, now, so Amy, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I don't want to drag this conversation up much longer than it needs to be, but I think there's an important point that came out of Mary's observations that hasn't been discussed, and that is that this is a choice. This would be a choice that families would be given to go hybrid, whereas the remote model there is no choice for our high school students. And with offering a hybrid option, students who want to stay remote and families who feel that that's important for their safety or have that option as well. A lot of this comes down to a risk-benefit analysis that each family is making with these trade-offs that have been mentioned, the trade-off between instructional time, curriculum, opportunities for in-person learning and social emotional opportunities. So I think that's one of the big benefits of the hybrid model, is that it gives students a choice. And the survey shows that this one survey shows that half the respondents are interested in having that choice.
Okay, that's a good point, Amy. Rich, did you have something you wanted to say, or did the moment pass?
Actually, Amy totally stole my thunder. That was going to be my point. I mean, from everything I can read from the governor's recommendation, schools are not spreading this. That's why most places, especially in Europe, are opening schools but closing down restaurants. So that's one consideration. But whether that's an acceptable risk to you or not, in my opinion, you need to have a choice. So right now there isn't a choice for the people that feel strongly that their kids need to have that social emotional learning. That balance of academics versus social emotional learning needs to be more closely weighed. Hybrid offers that. So I don't really have, other than being a school committee member, I don't have kids at the high school. So it's a little easier for me to be a little bit more abstract or objective and make this decision. But from my perspective, it's really about the choice. Right now, there's lots of parents that are upset, and it's because they don't have the choice. And I think that's something that we need to consider.
Fair enough. Hang on, Leah, just one second. I just want to give everyone an update kind of on where we are. So I personally am not going to try to shut this down. We'll go till midnight if we need to. I know there are parliamentary procedures and Robert's rules that can change that. Our default position right now is that the high school is in full remote. So no action or, well, basically no action or failed motion would remain in full remote. A motion would need to be made to move into hybrid. I'm not sure if we would put a date on that because I know there's some operational concerns around busing and slotting of kids into programs, and talked about end of semester and that sort of thing. But that would be sort of the way to move forward right now. It is also a possibility to say, let's wait on this to the next meeting. Okay, so I just want to let all the committee members know what their options are. So, but Leah, okay, now go ahead.
I was actually going to ask a process question. So thank you for handling and reading my mind. So I think that it would be good to vote on this at our next meeting, and not to vote to like do hybrid, right? Like Mary said, just to vote to bring this into fruition so that planning can begin. And then, if COVID goes off the charts, then of course, even the most ardent supporter of full in-person schooling would realize that that's a bad idea. But I would like an opportunity just to think on it, and maybe we could vote next week, especially perhaps we will have a full contingent of committee members as well. Although if others disagree, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah, if others disagree, they have their Robert's rules for it. I did want to ask Brooke related to that. If we voted to move into hybrid, and let's say the date was the end of the first semester, and then things changed and we wanted to sort of change our mind back to full remote for whatever reason, how difficult is that operationally?
I guess what I'm going to say is, and Jen really said this even earlier, we'll do it well, whatever the school committee asks us to do, right? So at the end of this, I mean, if you decide to go to hybrid, quite frankly, we're going to need to get things ready like ASAP. Like we need to get the signups. We need to know exactly who's coming into the building. It will take our business office some time to make sure that the busing situation is all ready to go, that D-bus is all set to go. So there's a lot of management stuff that will put into play. Steve will certainly have things that he has to do in his building. We've got some signage things that we'll do, but none of that is like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. We need 5 months to do it. I mean, we can do it. I just wanted to remind everybody that dashboard is on the front page. You can take a look at our numbers. I sent you the numbers earlier today. Just to think, like just kind of in snapshots of the months, so that you can see where our numbers are. So I would say if you're going to go to hybrid, then make that decision at the next meeting so that we can start planning. And then if the numbers continue, I think one of the strengths from my perspective of doing hybrid at the end of the month would be at the end of January, is that at least we'll know identified COVID cases after the winter break, so it at least puts us like almost 4 weeks, beyond that time period. So the other thing that I anticipate is that I think we will see some possible dramatic shifts for staffing at the high school that we'll want to contend with. Right now, everybody is, that may have some potential concerns or whatever about their own safety, the safety of their families or what have you. Everybody's kind of safe in their bubble, right, inside of the high school. And as soon as we move to hybrid, that will shift. And so we anticipate that we'll see some staffing shifts there. And so we're going to need to know that so that we can make sure that that is taken care of as well. So it's really all operational, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you decide to go to hybrid and then you look back and say, oh my gosh, these numbers are just through the roof, we're not, then we stay right where we are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I just think it's an important point, like what Sharon said earlier about the time and energy spent on different activities, whether it's preparing the move to hybrid, and then for whatever reason, maybe shutting it down. And then you're back to, well, we need to spend a bunch of time on the social emotional connection and bringing students into the building for labs and this, that you haven't spent the time doing,
That's right.
preparing for the hybrid. So I was sort of asking about that whiplash effect.
By the way, Sharon, I thought you did an awesome job at articulating that. Thank you very much. Because you're right. And sometimes I worry about that, because if this is the road that we go down and then you decide to shift to or stay with full remote, it's a lot of wasted time, quite frankly. However, the other way of looking at it would be, well, what happens if I'm going to be an optimist and say, okay, so what happens if by March we can do something? Well, then that work really isn't lost, right? Because then we can put that stuff into play at that point in time. So it's not, I guess I'll take a high road on this and say, I don't know that any of it will really be lost, because we'll still probably implement it at some point in time. I think, and Jen said this so well earlier, at the end of the day, we all want our kids back in our buildings. We just do. Like we all really want normal, in our schools. So we can't get there fast enough. I really am hoping upon hope that we are able to do full return next September. I mean, in a perfect world, that's where we'd be.
Okay. Mike, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just real quick. First, to the superintendent, thank you for your faith in your team and your staff. And you said, if the school committee votes for hybrid, we will make it work. And I know that comes from a place where you have 100% faith in what your team and those that work with you are capable of. I think the last time we had a conversation about remote or hybrid was in August, and our numbers were way, way different. And that felt like a reasonable time to talk about a shift from remote to hybrid. Our numbers are on the exact opposite end right now. So while I support the hybrid model, I don't think right now would be the time to vote on its implementation. So for what it's worth to my school committee members, that's my position on this. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I can poll the committee, or basically just sort of wait and give some time for anybody to make a motion. But what sounds like what I'm hearing, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is that you want to wait until the next meeting and put this on the next agenda. All right, so be it. Then we will thank you all. That was a very civil discussion. It's a really difficult topic. I know we say that all the time, but it really is. So just thank you. Thank you for all the people that put in the work on it. Thank you for everyone thinking about it and really taking this seriously. Like, I think in the end, having a true debate about this, oh my gosh, there's a kitty. Sorry, I got distracted. But no, really having a tough and deep debate on this will ultimately benefit us all in the end.
Elaine, may I say something really quick?
Oh, sure, Jen, go ahead.
You just made me laugh, because this happens all the time in class. It's like, oh, there's a cat, or hey, where's that? But so I just wanted to say before I leave, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to express my opinions, and with passion, I know. I do just want to end by saying that I couldn't be prouder to work at Nashoba Regional High School. I've been there 13 years, and I think we have the very best staff and administrative team, top to bottom. We couldn't do it without each other, and I'm very proud to be there. So I appreciate all of the thoughtful discourse. I know that everybody here is doing their job because they want the best for our district and our communities. And we do as well. I raised my kids here. They both graduated from Nashoba, and I'm just very proud to be there. So thank you. So I'm going to sign off now and go eat my dinner and prep for tomorrow. So thank you very much, everybody. Unless anybody has any more questions, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, if you ever want to throw me off topic, just mention an animal, show me an animal, like I'm there. So.
Elaine, can I just ask, are we done with Steve? Are we able to let him go too? Or
We can let Steve go as well. Yes.
Awesome. Steve, thank you, thank you,
Steve.
thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, so we have one, I know we're running way behind schedule, but what else is new around here? We have one more substantive, I'll call it, item, and that is talking about Tri-Town. So I think we're all pretty familiar with the context here. We went to Tri-Town meeting in October. Pretty much all the agenda items were regarding the schools. It was a contentious meeting. It was a difficult meeting. It was a challenging meeting. And after that, the school committee had decided that until some changes were made in the format and the procedure of these meetings and the tone of the meetings, we wouldn't participate. So I read the letter from the Bolton selectmen at the beginning of this meeting that says they assume we will be attending the next Tri-Town meeting that is on December 9th. And so our discussion right now is about what we should do about Tri-Town moving forward. So, Mike, your hand went up awfully fast, so I'll let you go ahead and open the discussion.
Well, I'll share with you all that I attended the most recent Board of Selectmen meeting for Bolton.
Okay.
I did not attend the last Tri-Town, but that is because I sometimes get overwhelmed with responsibilities, and I sometimes need a break. But I will share with you that based on my experiences and my conversations, there are some real, and when I say real, I mean genuine concerns that exist regarding several district-related issues. For instance, there were concerns brought up about parent and student voice, communication, transparency, criteria for a change, in teaching models, that is. In my opinion, there's also plenty of misunderstandings that warrant our collective attention. And we need to seize opportunities to clarify and frankly debunk these misunderstandings before they grow into something that can be harmful. And this is not a referendum on anyone in particular. It's not a judgment per se. It's just a function of having partial understandings on a number of really important and emotionally fraught topics. I think that agreeing to pull back from our Tri-Town collaboration both perpetuates these misunderstandings and I think provides fertile ground, to be honest with you, for future seeds of misunderstandings to grow. And I don't think personally this is in anyone's interest, neither the districts or our towns. I think that both sides of the issue have expressed themselves and articulated themselves well. I think that's probably a good starting point, but what we need now is partnership rather than partisanship.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have something that they would like to add? Sorry, it's funny when you see a whole bunch of hands on the screen go up. Sharon, why don't you go ahead?
I wanted to ask Mike, from sitting in that meeting, do you feel a sense that there is a genuine desire to have a two-way conversation and to work with the committee and with the district? Because when I hear that letter, when I read that letter, it feels like a classic bullying technique to force the committee back into the position of being in that meeting in a place where you can have all kinds of things said and have no opportunity to really present an alternative side. And so I would be leery of saying, sure, we'll go back, unless we were really very certain that there was a genuine feeling on the part of the selectmen that they were wanting to and willing to work with us rather than talk at us.
So can I respond to that? So I think I'll answer that by saying that from the perspective of the recipients from the letter that was sent from our end, it was probably felt just as aggressively. That was a difficult letter to receive, just like the letter that we received from the selectmen was a difficult letter to receive. So do I think we're there yet? No, but I'm also not going to shy away from something just because there's confrontation. I think there's an opportunity there to rebuild whatever trust has been lost. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of something that is productive rather than destructive. I don't want to be a part of something that continues to create gaps, create distance, and like I said, create opportunities for misunderstandings. I don't think it serves any of us. I don't think it serves this committee. I don't think it serves the town. And ultimately, and most importantly, it doesn't serve our students.
Sharon, did you want to respond to that, or do you have something else?
I did want to respond to that. I don't disagree with you, Mike. I just, I was just looking for, because you had been in that meeting, your insight into the willingness to have the conversation, because it needs to be a two-way conversation. And that is really what I'm wondering, is there a willingness to have a two-way conversation or not? So I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for information is, I guess, what I'm saying.
I would say I need to give this a few meetings to know, but I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to be there for it.
Okay, Amy?
I think Joe had his hand up. I'm willing to defer to him.
Yield your time.
Yield my time to Mr. Gleason. He had his hand up first.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Madam Chairman, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach on this in regards to the Tri-Town. And for the longest time, I've been asking the same question about Tri-Town. And apparently that question has now been answered, at least by the missive we received from the select board from Bolton, insofar as we are members of the Tri-Town. Now, I wasn't aware of that. And I comported myself in a manner at previous Tri-Towns as if I were not a member of Tri-Town, that I was simply an invitee. So apparently we are now members of Tri-Town, at least according to the letter that we received. So my question would be, and I ask it rhetorically, how do I know that? Is there a charter for this organization? Are there rules of procedure for this organization? How do I know what my standing is in this regard? And by way of example, I was very put out by the fact that at the October Tri-Town meeting, there was a decision to allow the chat feature to be used for purposes of posing questions. But that's not what the chat feature is used for. And it was used for commenting on what the superintendent was saying. And I felt it was inappropriate. So I don't think that our position in regards to what we have asked the Tri-Town, or at least the three select boards who have been forming the Tri-Town for the last 17 years, is all that unreasonable. I mean, I just felt that the whole meeting in October was untoward, and I think they went off topic too often. They didn't stick to the agenda. And if we're a member of Tri-Town, then I think we have every right to say, look, there should be some at least rules that we can look to and to rely on when we go to these meetings. Because I have to be frankly honest with you, the last two meetings, there simply wasn't adherence to agendas. There wasn't adherence to rules of order. They keep saying about this ad hoc committee. Well, okay. I mean, if there's something in the minutes that talks about how these meetings are going to be comported, I mean, is there something that even says the rules of order are in place? So I'll just finish up by saying I really didn't think that what we asked of the select boards was unreasonable. And I don't think we've ever got a really response from that. So I'll leave it at that. I just feel that until there's something codified that we can rely on, that we know our standing, that we stay the course of what we sent to the Tri-Town the last communication.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that we've sort of been given the history of Tri-Town, but I don't believe there is a charter or anything written down or really any official rules that I'm aware of. I think who's our senior committee member here right now? Is it Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know anything.
I don't. I'm not aware of anything, and what I've heard recently is an ad hoc committee is an ad hoc committee. But if I may say a couple of things. Number one, Mike, You said that they asked about the teaching model that we were doing. That's none of their business. We are elected officials just as they are. We do not report to them. They do not report to us. And we should have the respect of being elected officials at their same level, being members of the school committee. And from my point of view, we don't go back until that is recognized, admitted, and apologized for the way we were treated in October. We are not their servants. We are not their, at best, we are their constituents, but we are certainly not subordinate to them in any way, shape, or manner. That's number one. Number two, anything that has to do with the school committee, they can ask us about, and we'll be glad to answer them, but they do not tell us what to do. And I understand that there is a relationship when it comes to the budget, but we can always cross that bridge when we come to it. And quite truthfully, I agree with Joe, until somebody lays something out and we all agree to this thing, we do not attend either as a group or individuals. Now, remember that if you attend the Tri-Town meeting, you do not attend as a member of the school committee, just as they do not attend as a member of the Board of Selectmen. We all attend as citizens, individual citizens meeting there. And that's all I've got to say for it tonight.
Okay, Amy, I'm gonna go back to you. Mike, I see that you have your hand up.
I'd like to echo what Mike said about my desire to be a part of the solution and not, I'm putting words in his mouth. I don't even think he said those words, to be honest, but I think he's much more eloquent than I am anyway. But I have a problem with disengaging from the Tri-Town meetings, because I think that there is a purpose for them, but that purpose needs to be better defined. And echoing what Mr. Gleason said, I wonder if part of the problem is that we always come back to what is our purview and what's within our purview and what's on the agenda. And if what gets on the agenda has to be within our purview. And I think it would help to define what the purview of the Tri-Town meeting is for all the participants who are invited to attend. And the other thing I was shaking or nodding my head to as Joe was talking is that I also did not understand if I was, what my role was on the Tri-Town, at the Tri-Town meeting that I did attend. If I was there as a invited attendee, if I was there to speak as a school committee member, if I was there as a Tri-Town committee member, and that added confusion on my part when I went to the Board of Selectmen meeting and they asked me why I didn't attend the next meeting. And my answer was I actually didn't know that there was an expectation that I was supposed to attend as a school committee member, because I thought it was more appropriate for the leadership of each town to meet with the leadership of the district. But I think that it would be beneficial to define that for everybody. And being on the building subcommittee now, I think that the Tri-Town meetings will have a purpose. If for that alone, that's one reason why we need to make sure that we can work out the purpose of these meetings and what should be on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Rich, did you want to say something? And then Mary, I'll go to you.
Yes, please. I think there's been a lot of good points made. From my perspective, it's just frankly the wrong forum. I don't think the participants have exercised the right avenues, there's plenty of avenues. As been stated in the past, you can email any of the administrators, but if that isn't working, you can certainly email any of the school committee members directly. And I know for a fact that a lot of the people on that committee have not exercised all those options. I mean, the other thing is, I think that the people that are leading this discussion, the Tri-Town, they're misleading their constituents. They're claiming power that they don't actually have. Which is not a turf issue. It's just it's as simple as like if somebody's breaking into your house, you don't call the fire department to come and stop them, right? You call the police department. So if you're calling your selectmen to talk about school issues, guess what? It's the wrong. They're not going to be able to do anything, and they'll make. I've heard this analogy like, oh well, we can go and negotiate with NSTAR when there's like issues with that. That doesn't hold any weight. You're frankly just wasting your time. Maybe the school committee needs to be more responsive to you. I think we've taken some steps to address that. There's been 2 listening sessions. I believe Lancaster is having one too. But and just one last thing that's a little pet peeve of mine. If any of the selectmen are asking operational finance issues, that is not in your purview. You would never tolerate me, whether I was part of your town or not, going and interrogating the town administrator that's your employee on operational issues. I was on the finance committee in Stow. I had limited operational finance issues and oversight. I mostly focused on the budget. So I really think the folks in town, there's been a lot of tension. Please use the existing channels. And I wouldn't support going back to the Tri-Town at this point. I just don't see. I thought that the letter that was sent to us was fairly patronizing. The fact that they wouldn't even meet to set some ground rules, to me, is not in good faith. So that's where I stand. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I probably should mention, and correct me, Stow reps, if I'm wrong here, but the Stow Board of Selectmen actually voted at their selectmen's meeting not to attend Tri-Town coming up. So that is an additional factor in that if we're talking about the 3 towns, it looks like the town of Stow also won't be participating. I said I would go to Mary, so now I'm going to Mary.
Thank you. And I agree with the other members who have stated that it was never our expectation that we were members in that, if we went to Tri-Town, we were there as guests, so to speak, and that the superintendent would be there and the TAs, and if any of the select board members, it was a courtesy on their part too. And I've said that I had attended a number of these Tri-Town meetings, and there was nothing like the Tri-Town meeting that we all had to endure. And subsequent to that, in Bolton, our Bolton Select Board invited the three members to come and speak with them. And as an appointment, it was called, and supposedly this was going to be a 2-way conversation. What ensued was somewhat a repeat of the Tri-Town meeting, much as I felt that we put forward the best effort we possibly could, and in an effort to have good relationships. And I guess we didn't do the best job we could, because then on November 24th, while we weren't invited to the meeting, I also didn't mention that the Board of Selectmen didn't really share anything with us. They just asked us questions. And then on the 24th, there was another Board of Selectmen meeting where the whole agenda, 4 items, were all about school committee, school related issues. And we weren't invited to be there. I wasn't going to be anywhere because it was our wedding anniversary, but I did watch that afterwards. And so I would hate to think that the good effort that we had put forward in going and meeting with the Board of Selectmen was in vain, but especially from viewing the November 24th meeting and then receiving this letter, I'm not in favor there's only, how much can you take? And I think it's abuse, and it's a shame. I do think that the clarification of what Tri-Town is needs to happen, and perhaps it doesn't happen in what we had suggested, an ad hoc committee, but in some way, clarification with norms and following rules of order needs to happen. But I'm not in favor of just going back and being, and our attendance is expected. And believe me, I'm holding back here.
Okay, thank you for holding back, Mary. I think we appreciate it, Mike.
Mary, I don't want to see you upset. I would back away completely. Please don't ever get upset with me. Please pull your punches. So thank you for holding back. Listen, as I'm sitting here listening to each of you, I'm nodding my head and I'm saying, yes, you're making a very good point. Steve, I know you and I disagree oftentimes. You say matzo, I say matzah. You have Zoom issues. I don't really have Zoom issues as much. But what I'm saying is, I agree with you here. There are some real issues and they need to be addressed. Number one, this is a Board of Selectmen meeting. I don't want to conflate the two. This is a Board of Selectmen meeting. You said if they have questions, ask them. You're right. They should be asking questions. They did ask questions. And frankly, I'm glad they asked questions because I was able to clarify it. And you're saying that there's, and I'm really not picking on you. I'm actually agreeing with you. And I'm just trying to open up an understanding. When you said that there's no relationship between the two, well, I think the thing that connects us with them is our community. They have, the community has their ear and the community has our ear. So if we continue to separate ourselves, there's going to be a division. And I had a really good conversation with a member, a resident in Bolton. I'm tired of divisions. I really want to bring things together. Now, there are 10 other people on this committee. All 10 of you can disagree with me. This is what I feel. I feel very, very strongly about this. I don't want to be petty, and I don't want to be divisive. A process has to happen in order to rebuild trust. That's what this is all about. And it started off a little rough. It got a little bit less rough. I'm now in more communication. Hopefully I'm building some trust with them. It remains to be seen how it continues, but I have to believe in my heart of hearts that it's going to get better. I don't believe that a plan of saying, let's just stay away is going to make anything better. If anything, and all but certainly it will make things worse. So I'm okay standing by myself, but I would really ask you guys to reconsider avoiding communication in a tri-town setting.
So I would pose a question to the committee. Why is the tri-town setting particularly important? It sounds like the purpose of those meetings was to share information. And aren't there other channels we could pursue to share information back and forth for the time being? I'm all for somehow working on, I don't know, process and tone and culture and stuff. But I think that stuff takes some time. And I think it might take some individuals, maybe like you, Mike, if I'm going to volunteer somebody other than myself, because I don't have the time or the energy for it, to work on those things. It feels like in the interim, aren't there other options? That's sort of a question out to everybody. Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go back to my point. I don't think this is the right forum. I mean, there's so many opportunities that I'm sure Orlando could set up a call with the superintendent if he needed to. If the Lancaster selectman wants to know more about operational finance, he could call myself. He could call Joe from Lancaster. I don't know if he's called Joe from Lancaster about he's actually on the budget and warrant committee with me. So there's so many avenues. We could set up a call with Pat if there's operational finance questions. I just don't think a public forum. I mean, the selectmen could get together on their own. You know, you could get 3 selectmen getting together and one from each town to have their own little get together. The superintendent, is now getting get together with the TAs again. I mean, I just don't know that a public forum to rehash issues that really aren't under their purview, and not have it with the stakeholders, which are us, the school committee members. So I just go back to, what do you expect to come out of this? If you're going to the firemen for a police issue, it's not going to get resolved. So I've said enough.
Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that everybody's working really hard on school stuff right now. And I know that there's not a lot of extra time and energy for additional things as important as they might be. Leah.
I think that I agree with what all of you guys have said, especially what Joe said at the top. I would be willing to go to some kind of a tri-town if there was one agenda item, and that was discussing what is tri-town. So perhaps we can start there and have a tri-town meeting that just helps acclimate all of us to each other, because I totally agree with Mike. There's too much at stake right now to allow divisions to continue. I see that even within our own committee, we are in disagreement lately, and it bums me out, and I don't like it. I wish that we could be more kumbaya. So I would recommend that if we go, that there's one agenda item, and that is norming the process.
Okay, so I think that, we might be too late for the December 9th meeting, which I have a personal conflict anyway. So I certainly couldn't attend. But I think what you're saying is that's the response that we could send would be, we're willing to come back to the table when there's a, special tri-town meeting with that one agenda item on it. All right, Steve?
Well, you certainly don't want to send me. And Mary, I am impressed what you're holding back. You and I should discuss that sometime offline. But I would think, why don't we kind of let's see what the Stow Town Board of Selectmen letter does, because they said they would not return unless there were changes made. And we've already sent a letter saying we would not return unless changes were made. So that's kind of like half the tri-town group. Let's see what happens. Joe from Lancaster, maybe that's going to be your new. Maybe you can talk to some of the people there and see what their feelings are, unless you already have.
Go ahead, Joe.
Madam Chair, thank you. I don't want to belabor this, and yeah, I'd be happy to speak to my select board in Lancaster. I did want to make one quick comment though, and I think actually, Steve, what you're saying is sort of, I was going to say this, and you sort of stole my thunder here. Just going back to what Dr. McCarthy was saying earlier. And I'm not looking for a gold star here by any means when I say this, but I was at the Bolton Select Board meeting. I was at all of them when they have this on there, because it's like I got to go and watch. I just have to see what they're going to say and what's going to happen. And I thought our three representatives comported themselves outstandingly at the Select Board meeting that they attended a couple of weeks ago. But there was one question, and I think it sort of underlines the whole concept here of my issue with the Tri-Town. And perhaps if Mr. Rubenstein from Stow is suggesting that I reach out to my select board, I would probably say the same thing to my committee members from Bolton, that maybe you need to reach out to your select board and talk to your selectmen. Because the one question that I thought was, and I spoke to Mr. Eckel about this, so he already knows what I'm going to talk about here. One of the questions, I believe it was Mr. Horesh, was that one of the select board members asked him in regards to when there's interaction between constituency, are you guarded in your responses? Okay, so I see Mr. Horesh smiling on that. And I just thought to myself, in what universe is an elected official ever permitted to be guarded in regards to a constituent question? So if that's the sort of question that's being asked, I'm like, maybe we need to have a sort of a sit down and understanding exactly what we do, because Steve's right. We are not their subservient board. We don't answer to them. We are their equal. We run in the same elections as they do. We get the same nomination papers as they do. We comport ourselves according to the same way they do. We have to submit the same finance reports as they do. We are their equals. And I just thought it was very odd. So I'm going to do what Mr. Rubenstein says. I will reach out to my select board chair. I will talk to him. And I encourage my colleagues from Bolton to do the same.
Okay. In the interest of time, I just want to give an update of where we are. So it sounds like the December 9th meeting is a pass. Is that correct? Members are certainly welcome to attend as citizens. That's always an option. That's always your right as a resident of any of these towns. And then I'm not sure if we should pick it up at the next school committee meeting to see if there's something more that we can do. But it does also sound like reaching out to our individual towns. Perhaps the town school committee representatives can get together and kind of decide who's going to lead that charge for their towns, to see if there's any changes in the communication or changes in the tone relationships. What do you guys think about this? I'm not sure we can get something more formalized completed tonight. I think that's my major concern. Rich?
Quickly, I don't think we need to do anything more. I mean, we asked for them to have a ad hoc committee with us. You know, they can think that's silly. I think from what I hear, it sounds practical from people on this committee. So, you know, maybe the stakeholders want to change their mind. Maybe not. I mean, I'll just speak for the Stow school committee members. We have very good working relationships with the selectmen, and we communicate with them constantly. So I'm sure other school committee members are trying to do the same, and I hope you have the same success we've had.
Okay, Sharon.
Sounds like we're all on the same page here about that we need to have more clarity going forward in order for this to be a productive meeting. I think in Lancaster, the relationship is pretty open, pretty smooth. Although I don't know that the specific conversation has been said or has been had, as Joe said, about connecting specifically about the Tri-Town. I think it's reasonable to maybe perhaps put out that idea that, you know, we will attend a meeting when we can set a meeting that is one item only, and that is having this discussion about creating norms for the meeting, and that throws the ball back into their court, and they can decide then how to proceed from there.
Amy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I've been debating whether to bring up this point, but I think it needs to be said that one of the reasons that I think that the last Tri-Town meeting became so contentious, not just with the way that selectmen treated the superintendent and school committee members who were brave enough to speak, was because, you know, I think that there is a sentiment within the community that they would have more opportunity for to speak in the chat or have opportunity for public comment at the Tri-Town meeting and at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And so it was a venue that was available to them, and they took advantage of it. So, you know, I think it's contributed to the tenor of the meeting.
Okay, that's fair enough. It is an extraordinary year. Fuses are short and tempers are high all around. That's for sure. Okay, I don't think I need a motion on this. If someone wants to make one, that's fine. But I don't think I need it. So, all right, speak now, forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we will move on to actually a much more uplifting and a really nice agenda item, a donation acceptance. Is this Pat, who's been sitting here for 3.5 hours already. I really hope she's not waiting for this. And I just want to say, like, when I saw the letter, the donation letter, I was moved to tears to think that a family in our towns could be so generous and so thoughtful. Their words in the letter, which I'm sure we won't be able to read the whole thing aloud tonight, were just, they meant a lot to me. I'm sure they meant a lot to our teachers. I'm sure they meant a lot to everybody. So, Pat.
Yes, we have a letter here with a donation for $7,500. And I'll just touch on the part that Elaine had mentioned there. It was important to me too. It is an understatement that the life got hard for the frontline workers in March. Educators are frontline workers. Unfortunately, the media never really and truly included them in the narrative in the spring. Only now have they circled back to report on the difficulties educators experience trying to maintain a high level of performance during the pandemic. And then he goes on to say, please accept this gift for $7,500 as a small token of appreciation and hopefully as an inspiration to other philanthropically oriented people in the community to consider giving a portion of their annual gifts to local organizations who are building the future for our country, our children, and our teachers, true patriots. These funds should be used to enhance the environment for teaching in some small way. Thank you for everything that you do. John Joseph, on behalf of the Joseph family.
Yeah, so thank you again and again and again to the Joseph family. It's truly amazing. So I just need a motion to accept the donation.
I move to accept the donation in the amount of $7,500 from the Joseph family in Bolton to be used to enhance the environment for teaching.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Amy.
Yes.
Brett.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Elaine, yes, and Leah. You're on mute, but that's okay. I know you said yes.
I said a very grateful yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I know there's a lot going on, but when the school district decides what they're going to do with this money, we would love to hear about how it's helping others.
Will do.
All right, so now we are on to subcommittee reports, budget and warrant.
Budget and warrant held the budget primer seminar this afternoon. We had pretty good attendance, and we're all set to move forward. We'll be looking forward to that Saturday in January when we get the wish book, and we can all take a look at what that's going to be. And as the budget moves forward, it's going to be more than it was last year, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens. That's it for tonight.
All right, thank you. Personnel.
So on 11/23, Kathy, Codianne, and I met with Brooke, and we discussed the number of goals to come up with a more achievable number and limiting the superintendent's goals to 4. There were at least 6 there, if not more. And looking at district goals, 2 district goals, the way superintendent had in the last annual plan, both of which would have to do with the high school. And a lot of these goals will be continuing from previous goals, especially since last year. So much was interrupted by the kind of year that we had and by COVID. And so what it doesn't, is it's difficult, especially for our superintendent to let go of some of these, but prioritizing and realizing that the work will still go on in terms of the equity, anti-racism, social justice, as well as the administrative handbook. And the work will go on, and we'll get reports on those. But for the actual district goals, they both have to do with high school. One about more the climate, the visioning, and incorporating the hiring of the new principal, as well as mascot, and a lot of things that contribute to the environment, including the faculty, and being able to continue the work, or at least begin the work with John Doria and Teachers 21. The other goal having to do with the high school in terms of the design thinking, the work with Dr. Foster and faculty, as well as the whole building process and the committee. So there's a lot to that too. Those are two really hefty goals. The professional practice goal having to do with superintendent and community communication, and the I'm hearing an echo, but maybe that's from something else.
Steve.
Oh, and the last goal, the student learning goal, having to do with looking at the high school social history, social studies courses, as well as civics, looking for alignment with the 2018 history and social studies frameworks, and also the student-led civics projects that are mandated, not only for grade 8, but also for certain courses in the high school. So we will be meeting again. So these are ongoing, and looking to make these goals as smart as possible, which also takes some time. But our next meeting will be December 16th at 4 o'clock.
Great, thank you. Are you bringing those goals forward to the full committee at the next meeting?
Well, we're hoping to. We'll
Okay.
have to wait and see. There's we'll be meeting, and we'll see whether they're in the final form. But at least we'll report on them. If not, bringing them forward at that meeting, it would be the subsequent meeting. So we're
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right, policy.
Hi guys, so we kind of brought forth everything that we wanted to talk about earlier tonight. So we have the public comment policy that will be read for a second time at the next meeting. And we were hoping to perhaps have the committee's approval of maybe not for the next meeting, but by our first meeting of the new year, to allow people into the Zoom call to read their own public comments as a first step toward creating those bridges for the community to feel like they can kind of participate in the public meeting to the extent they are allowed. We have a special meeting that we have scheduled for next week to handle some kind of pop-up policy changes. So Brooke, if you have anything that is coming down the pike that you need us to manage for you, that is happening next week. So just let us know. And I'm pretty sure that's it, unless Amy and Elaine want to add to that.
Nope.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Communication.
All right, so Communication Subcommittee has moved away from our recommendations, and we're kind of starting a new phase in our adventures in communication. We are soliciting the consultation of one Chris Horan. Dr. McGuire, am I pronouncing his last name correctly? All right, yes, Chris Horan. So he is a consultant that is going to join us in our next meeting on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. We have invited the superintendent, and she has graciously accepted our invitation. We've also invited the chair, whichever version is available and willing. And each person who will be joining is being asked to bring the strengths, the communication strengths of our committee and the administration, and the communication challenges as well. And I think that this is probably the first of several meetings where we'll be asking Mr. Horan some of his suggestions and advisement in terms of what we might consider pursuing in the near future. So lots of fun things coming to fruition.
Cool, thank you. I met Chris Horan a couple of times at the MASC conference, and he's a really good guy. His sessions are always very well attended. They're great, so that's awesome. And finally, we have a new subcommittee, the School Building Committee. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The School Building Committee will be holding its initial introductory and organizational meeting on December 8th at 6 p.m. And as regards to the committee itself, I have prepared a welcome letter for all the members. I have sent it to the superintendent. Madam Superintendent, I ask you, I implore you, be unmerciful in your editing of same.
I thought it looked great.
Oh, okay. Well, all right.
I
Thank you
read
very
it.
much.
It looks great.
Oh, okay. Then, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so items to be considered for next agenda. So what I have on here is that the hybrid at the high school, we'll bring that up again. Tri-Town will come up again, possible superintendent's goals, public comment based on what Amy said previously in the meeting. There's a lot of things that are on the regular calendar as well. A capital plan update, staffing updates, which I'm assuming is both COVID and non-COVID related. A school choice hearing. Does that have to be done by the end of the year?
Yeah, no, but I think that we probably need to take a look at the agenda. It's just going to be too full. There's just no way we're going to be able to get it all in. And I think in part, like, we may end up having to plan for an extra meeting in January just to hear all the subcommittees, or not the subcommittees, but the departments and units who generally report out as we go into our budget season, like that workshop at the end of January. So we may just have to do some rejuggling, because we'll be here till midnight countless times. Like if we don't.
Yeah, because on this list is also some policy amendments that are COVID related. The business manager update that she does every month. School choice, preschool, and other fee reviews. I mean, and plus the legal training before the
some of that we're just going to push off till January.
Okay, that is fine. It's all written down, so we'll get to it eventually. So yeah.
Can we just have a brief where we are with the high school representative for the school committee?
That's what I was going to ask about, Steve.
That's actually a good question.
As an agenda item, Steve, is that what you're asking?
Well, either that or just in the superintendent's report, you could cover that and say where we are. A lot of those things, it would work right into your report,
Okay.
Different items.
No, thank you, Steve. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good point. Anything else that we're forgetting about? All right, then, Leah, we still have an executive session to go into. So
I know.
If you could read that motion.
Ooh, juggling multiple things is hard. Okay.
Yes.
I move to go into an executive session at 9:47 p.m. pursuant to MGL C 30A Section 21A2 to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. School committee member Brett Collins will be excused due to conflict of interest. Executive session to include Superintendent Clenchey and Human Resources Director Anne-Marie Stoika. Committee will adjourn from executive session.
Seconds.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Amy.
Yes.
Brett is excused. Rich.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Elaine, myself, yes, and Leah.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Pat.